Wow, this took a while, guys. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is the second part, which I think is the much more interesting to me than the first part. How do I hide this? Hopefully this is gonna do it. All right. Oh no, you little bugger. Well, we'll see. I think I wanna. Yeah, to me, it's kind of like giving these talks is very awkward because I feel like if I give these talks, it almost feels like I have some sort of superior knowledge that puts me in a position that I can dispense wisdom in some sort, but I don't. But I feel like it's a bit of my duty to try to. It's not a privilege; it's a duty to try to instill some of these ideas into your mind because you are the next generation. And I want these things to kind of, whatever we have around us and maybe different instantiation of it, I want them to continue in some way. And I find that at university, none of this is being discussed. And if it's not discussed in university, I have no idea where it's discussed. And I don't know who. I reached out to different people and they're like, oh, the English department should be teaching this. Or I'm like, that's not the English department's role. Philosophy and technology is not, English for me. I think you guys saw this last week with the spacecraft. My feel is that we are all we are realizing this, I think, on a spaceship, a big planetary scale spaceship. And from my perspective, none of us knows what the user manual for this spaceship is. And not only that, but we are literally, nobody wants to take responsibility of trying to drive the spaceship. And everybody's pretending like, oh, you know what, somebody else will do it. I don't know if, it's not that I'm saying like we should take the steering wheel, but I think we have to start this discussion somehow. And maybe not even who's driving, more about like, where's the steering wheel? Where's the throttle? Where's the brake? What are the instruments that we can use to control this? Maybe I can move myself. I don't know how to set this up so that it's more kind of, so I talk to you guys. Also the Zoom people, I want them to hear me. It's gonna be a weird one. Anyway, I think you've seen this plot. I've shown it a few times. This is, can I? Oh yeah, maybe we can do this. Sorry guys on Zoom, I'm moving things around. Uh-oh. Well, maybe this is a bit better. We'll see. So this plot was, I think, maybe 10 years ago. I was reading this autobiography, or it was, like more or less an autobiography of Richard Hamming. And in the 1950s, he noticed that Bell Labs, the number of patents was doubling every 17 years. And then he was like, I wonder if that's the doubling rate of human knowledge. And he came up with this kind of hypothesis. And then there was this paper, they actually didn't link it here. There's a paper in Nature in 2021 that actually showed that the total human knowledge actually doubles about 17 years. The useful human knowledge is every 15 years. There's something about the amount of technical knowledge, applied technical knowledge, because the technical knowledge always can also becomes obsolete. I think that says a more linear growth. But to me, the important part, it could be linear or it could be exponential. If it's exponential, it's actually very strange. When I have this timeline here, you are born or I am born, somebody's born. And by the age of 5, let's say you start going to, you might have seen this in 353, you go to kindergarten. That's where you start actually learning some of the techniques that we use to run our society. And then I'm thinking by the age of 20 or something, you finish university, and then at that point you are supposedly equipped with enough information to apply it in the world effectively. By the time you, let's say, retire, somewhere around here, the amount of knowledge in the world has gone up by about 8 times. So whatever you learn in university, it's like a quarter of what you'll have to be able to master or apply by the time you retire. I'm not sure if this is, these are very ballparky numbers. Let's say you have kids at 35 at some point. Your children, when they are born, within the same amount of time, like from the age 5 to age 20, they have to learn, quite a bit more than you. So this was 16 times. So whatever. And this angle here to me is like the learning rate, and this is, I think it's limited. From my perspective, it's not like us humans can learn much faster. It might be. I'll talk a bit about AI use, and there's all kinds of applications of it. Can we improve this angle in some way? But my feel is that this gap between what we know and what we should know to operate in the world is becoming larger and larger. And this is a bit painful because before, let's say, I don't know, up to maybe 200 years ago, knowledge in society wasn't actually growing much. Like if you look at the Romans and somebody living in the 1600s, or maybe even before Romans, the Egyptians, even like civilizations thousands of years ago, their way of life was very similar to somebody living in the 1600s. It wasn't like, until the Industrial Revolution happened, it wasn't like you're living much more different than your great-great-great-grandpa. So that, in my mind, that's where, if you looked at the senior people in a society, they would seem kind of as the figureheads that would allow them, because they accumulated all this knowledge and knowledge wasn't increasing, they could dispense this knowledge to the new generation, and they were, okay, yes, I can listen to them because our daily life doesn't change it. They've seen it before. I should probably listen to them. I think nowadays this has very much become obsolete. Senior people, they might have some ideas of what's happening, but those are diverging very quickly from the path of technological societies. And in a way, our society has kind of lost connection with the past and the future, past generations. I think from my perspective, I'm going to probably lose contact with the next generations much faster than my ancestors, my grandparents lost touch with my parents' generation. And this is because of these things. I think sometimes you'll teleport yourself up here. So these are kind of why I'm doing these things. I'm like, nobody talks about this. I'm like, it's crazy. The other thing, last lecture I talked about money, and I'm going to close fairly quickly the topic of money. But this was 2023, so 3 years ago, the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada, they said there's going to be $1 trillion worth of assets being transferred from parents to children from 2023 to 2026. And I can't remember who said this to somebody on Twitter. I really like this idea of you can transfer ownership. You cannot transfer ownership just by transferring a title. And this was if I give someone a company without like a business of some sort that's worth millions of dollars, or like assets that are worth millions of dollars, and they don't know how to use them, they will literally destroy them. And this is an idea of don't confuse access with readiness. If you have access to something, it doesn't mean that you know how to use it. And I think I mentioned on Reddit the financial independence, retire early communities. You will see there people who are like, I'm 19, grandpa died, he left me X million dollars. What do I do with it? And everybody says, don't touch it. You have no idea what to do with it. If you use it now, you're gonna like literally it's poison for you right now, that type of money. And it's the money behind the money, it's not the money, it's the access that money gives you. And if you have no idea how to use it, it's like connecting yourself to a 1 kilovolt line. It's like you have the assets that you have give you so much available options that you have, and they pass through, and you have no way to filter that to have a higher impedance to that path, and it's just going to burn you. I'm thinking about my kids. If things, the other thing is you can lose all this wealth. And hopefully maybe some of it goes back into the society at large, so somebody comes and buys. So you'll see if you follow this article, there are people now that a farm, before, if you had kids, nobody wanted to work on the farm. Your kids were like, why would I work on the farm? Now farms are like $6 million, $10 million. Each kid is like, oh, okay, I've got this farm. I have no idea how to work with it. I'm going to sell it to somebody. And a lot of times what happens is all these farms are being sold to corporations. The number of individual farmers, like family-owned farms, is decreasing very, very fast. And these corporations, they will run it in some way. Some of them will run it better, some of them will run it worse. But I think they will run it in the same way, more or less. There's going to be very little diversity in how farms are run. And we are, and from that perspective, I feel like we're losing a lot of valuable know-how. And it's also, I'm not going to go into, there's a lot of things to talk about farming. Anyway, this is the other aspect of why I'm giving these talks. And then the last one, and maybe I'll put this on your plate, or in your mind, I want to plant a seed. This is, I'm going back to like, why am I here? Why am I not working in some other company? I feel like normally this is how I see my life and the value that I can add, positive change that I can make in the world, and I kind of integrate under that curve. There's the value I can add to society. But I feel like if I try to provide some of my nuggets of understanding to others, maybe I can help you kind of reach some sort of critical speed so you can take off faster. And that's going to be a second order kind of effect where if I transfer some of this information to you, you might be able to go farther. I'm literally giving you some of my momentum. So instead of going and work at Google, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to dispense some of this information because my feel is that the value, at a certain amount of wealth, I don't think any more monetary wealth is going to improve the society around me. Adding value to others around me is going to improve my wealth much more dramatically. The way I think about it is like if you're a king in the 1500s, you are the ruler of an entire kingdom. But would I trade my life there with being a villager right now in somewhere, I don't know, on the coast of Italy? I don't have a lot, but I have access to fresh water. I have access to medication, like healthcare. There's no wars, there's no pandemics. That wealth, that type of wealth, is not monetary, but it's, from my perspective, is much more than monetary value. So maybe by improving everybody around me, the values I have, the value I have access to is increasing. Anyway, enough of motivation. I did want to say a few things about, these are my thoughts, and they are very, whenever I read them, I'm like, holy smokes, I could go into, there's so much more detail and nuance to say, but I'm going to try to cover some advice here that's spanning multiple decades. And if things change very fast, the advice I give will sound very bland, very general. And I call it here almost trivial. Because if you think about, like, if I were to live 1,000 years ago and I would want to advise someone on how to live through the next 1,000 years, I can't be like, oh yeah, in the first 100 years you do this, in the next 50 years you do that, then in the next 100 years you do this. It's going to have to be something very general. The other thing that I don't really like is language. Language, so I have this, my thoughts sample from reality. Reality has a lot of nuance to it. My language digitizes my thoughts. And at every stage of these things, we get aliasing. It's like, I want to say something, but what I'm thinking something, what I say is kind of sampling from there, and it doesn't convey everything I say. So there's going to be some controversial thoughts. I'm going to say I think, more nuanced ideas about these things, but I can't really capture them in the words. I have to kind of have a lot of discussions on each sentence. I can't have long discussions on each sentence. The other idea is there's going to be lots of ideas. So sometimes you're like, what the heck is this? So you can tune out. All right. That being said, we're going to go. So yeah, ask questions. I think some of you have strong opinions. So you'll see there's some thoughts. I'm trying to, maybe it's going to elicit some resonance in your mind. So this is what we're going to cover, and we'll just go into it. So the first parts to me are kind of, I think, this is me wrapping up the previous conversation. This is, I think, what I've seen discussed a lot, and these are kind of more exotic ideas. All right, I'll start with this. I'm going to try to wrap out what this idea of money. I think the latest US dollar bills don't look like this, but I like this one because it's a bit cleaner. I don't know if you looked at these bills and you saw this part here. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. I had no idea when I was on the ground what the heck this means. I was seeing these things and I was interested in money, and I was like, oh, how does money come about? What's the deal with this? So I saw that. Then you can look at this was 2006, a bit older banknotes here. They have this part here. So this says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or any. So when I saw this, I was like, wait, isn't this money? what the heck do they mean by redeemable and lawful money? This is illegal money? What's the deal with this? Then if you go back even further, so this was 1950s, you go to 1920s, you'll see this on the banknote. Redeemable in gold on demand at the United States Treasury or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve Bank. Then there's also, so this is kind of started to talk about something like gold and lawful money. There's some other type of money than banknotes. And then there was back in the day, there was a $100,000 banknote. And at the bottom it does say, so this is to certify that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America, $100,000 in gold payable to the bearer on demand as authorized by law. So when you look back into 2006, these are kind of evolutions of how money was being represented in our society. But these banknotes are a bit anachronistic now. You'll see these messages on them like, wait a second, what the heck? This is kind of a legacy of previous usage of money. So nowadays, everything is, you probably heard the term fiat currency, and why the heck do we have that? This happened as it was a transition over probably like hundreds of years. It wasn't like it happened at once. The last instance of it being a transition was a lawsuit in the 1970s. And I think there was this guy, whatever his name was, Milam. I think he went to the bank. He's like, he went to the bank out of, I think, $5. He's like, I want the lawful money. Give me lawful money instead of this $5. And they were like, what the heck do you want? And then he sued the bank. And then anyway, the US Federal, some sort of circuit said, no, this is lawful money. And then the guy who actually wanted gold, that's what he wanted. Then they made their judgment based on some, this is how crazy the law is. They made their judgment on some lawsuit in the 1800s where some guy, I think he was trying to sell some hay and he wanted gold, and the US military gave him banknotes. And a lot of times, and we'll go into this is how money was kind of used for financing all kinds of military operations. And there was a lawsuit back in the 1800s, and in there they said, oh no, you should be taking this paper instead of gold. In the 1970s, probably like almost 100 years later, they said, we quote that precedent that you have to use these paper banknotes instead of gold. But the idea of this money in banknotes form, or nowadays is kind of Bitcoin, and I'll talk a bit about this too. So you can, and I'm keeping it fairly focused on the United States because it's a bit clearer. Every country has kind of more or less kind of gone through this. It's fairly complicated. But the idea was that a while ago, probably in the 1800s, everybody was using gold as the currency. As the demand for resources was increasing and the US government wouldn't have enough resources, they were issuing these banknotes, and also to kind of facilitate trade. There was some interesting event that happened in the 1930s where all private gold was confiscated. I'm not sure how many of you know about this. This is the United States. All private gold was taken away. It was a huge deal, so it's about 100 years ago. Nobody is like, what? That happened? What? And so a lot of people were very upset. Then the US Federal Reserve kind of owned all that gold. And what the US Federal Reserve was doing was saying, like, look, we have all this gold in our vaults here, and every banknote we issue is backed by this gold. And I can't remember what it was back in those days. Like, I think it was $20 per ounce of gold or something. After World War II, though, the economy kind of grew fairly rapidly. And the idea is that money is reflecting the value in the economy. And the gold was no longer able to, so a lot of money had to be created, and I'll talk a bit about that. And at some point, the gold in the vaults was no longer able to match one-to-one to the banknotes that were issued. And this gold wasn't actually owned by individuals. This gold was owned by countries. So Germany and France and all these countries had gold in the US Federal Reserve vaults. And I think they went to the United States and was like, we want our gold back. Here's dollars, give us gold back. And then Richard Nixon's like, you know what? We are no longer pegging the US dollar value to the gold in our reserves. We let it float, so our dollar value is going to be only we can reflect the value of the dollar to respect to other currencies, not with respect to gold. So he never. I think that's how now United States, I think, has the highest reserves in the world. I think though France very recently this year, France withdrew a few tons, some of gold from the U.S. Federal Reserve. We'll see. This idea of currencies, it's been around for a long time, and a lot of, I think, to me, kind of landmark figures. So Friedrich Hayek, who's a somewhat controversial economist, but in my perspective, he's very insightful. He was talking about everybody, this is 1970s, everybody should have their own money. So it's Mitty's money, and if you can somehow keep track of it, you can trade Mitty's money for somebody else, for John's money, all right, at this exchange rate. And the idea kind of was pushed around for a while. At some point, Bitcoin is kind of it's very well marketed, but it's not the only, if you look at the history of Bitcoin, there are many other instances of cryptocurrencies that were being tried at the same time. And Bitcoin they had a very interesting algorithm, and it kind of took over in a way, kind of in the imagination of a lot of people, and they think this is the future of money. I disagree with it. I think there's going to be some and we'll talk a bit more about what the heck is money some more. This is me kind of looking a bit more at money as like, how did it start? 20,000 years ago, it was used for assets tracking. So you had kind of like, I think on these bones, you're like, oh, I have 3 cows, and there's going to be 3 notches here. In Iraq, it was they had these ways to keep track of your assets that you would put in a bank, and you'd have these like clay spheres, and you have like all your assets in there, and you go to someone and like, here's my assets, I'm gonna go on some pilgrimage, when I come back, I want these assets back. I think, the Middle East, there was a lot of innovation thousands of years ago, and then I think that innovation moved a lot in Asia, in China. So to me, the first version of banknotes was created during the Song Dynasty. I don't think anyone knows the Song Dynasty is kind of the best dynasty. It's where they developed the compass, the printing press, the gunpowder, a very interesting art. And so they were kind of, and then the Mongols came and they took over, and the dynasties come in and go. So, but during those times, they created these banknotes to facilitate trade. So it'd be like, hey, I have this copper in the bank, and instead of me moving these tons of copper, here's a banknote that covers that. So that was kind of an interesting evolution. The people, I think, in the kind of around Indonesia somewhere, in the Peloponnesian kind of islands there, they had a very interesting concept of money where they didn't really use it to kind of have it as on themselves. They said, okay, money is a representation of assets that we have, or some sort of value, and we are gonna build these very unique structures, and they have these big stones, and the stone here, this is, I think, at the Bank of Canada in Ottawa. They no longer use them, but they had these stones, and the richest person in the community was like, yes, I own this stone, and I'm gonna give you 1/10 of the stone, and that's kind of my gift to you. There was at some point, I think they traveled with one of those stones from one island to another, and the boat sank. But the community still knew there is a stone down there somewhere, and that guy owns it. And this is this idea of the values. Kind of, it's a concept in our in the community's imagination. It's not like, it's nothing intrinsic to the money. And then with that stone, I think for many generations, like, oh yeah, who owns the stone at the bottom of the sea? And it was like, it's owned between these guys or whatever. And I just want to wrap up this idea of money. So nowadays, I think the way, and I don't know how many of you know how money is being generated in society, in our economies. And I'm going to go through how US does it. I think a lot of other countries are using a very similar model. So money is mostly generated by actually private banks, but it has this very interesting path where every year Congress passes some sort of budget, and the budget says, okay, we are going to issue these treasury bills to build, I don't know, infrastructure, or to pay for the military, or to pay for healthcare or whatnot. And then the treasury takes these bills and goes to the US Federal Reserve and says, the US Congress said that I need $1 billion. Here's the bill. And the US Federal Reserve goes, okay, I take your bill. I'm going to put on my ledgers. Then nobody prints money anymore, but it's just an entry. I'm going to create $1 billion on this ledger. And then I'm going to give you the treasury or whoever needs the money. So maybe some construction company. Here's $1 billion. Go build the bridge or go build whatever you are going to build. So they put that money in circulation. And then that money goes into circulation. A lot of the times what happens is, let's say I got $1 billion to build this bridge. I take that money, I'm the constructor, I take it and put it in a private bank. And then the private bank takes that, holds it, takes, let's say, $1 billion. And then there's this idea of, well, it used to be. Nowadays, it's somewhat different. There's the idea of a reserve, the reserves that the bank has. So the bank could loan more money. So the private banks would generate, let's say, for $1 billion that they receive, they could generate like 90 billion, like out of nothing, and they could lend that. And then based on that, they would be like, okay, now I'm gonna, if I lend 90 billion to the economy, that goes in the economy is gonna come back to me, and I kind of keep lending it over and over and over again. And these were like, when the banks lent money, it was because somebody said, hey, I'm gonna buy a house, and I promise I'm gonna pay you back the money that you lend me. And that promissory idea was, I'm going to generate somehow value in the economy to cover the money I borrowed from you. The value is not generated yet. So when I say I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to say I'm going to take a loan. And with that loan, I'm saying something about, through my work, I'm going to generate the value that $100,000 would represent. And I'm going to somehow give it back to you. So it feels like it is somewhat arbitrary, but at the same time, it's somewhat reflecting the nature of the value in the economy. So normally you would have the banks kind of store a certain amount of the money. So if I would give you $1 billion to the bank would have to store 100 million and then lend out 900 million. This used to be the case until 2020. And then in 2020, the US Federal Reserve has dropped the reserves requirements to 0%. You might have heard of these Basel Accords. I have no idea if you ever. So there's all these things where you're like, what's going on here? So there's other requirements now that the banks have to satisfy. But the private banks are more or less kind of, depending on how they do their accounting, there are somewhat stringent requirements. We'll see how long the stringency lasts. But they can generate money out of nothing in a way. Now the pros and cons of using money. So one of the most important part of being able to use money is the fact that money is able to capture information about our system in ways that I don't think we can do it in any other way. So this is a diagram from an economist called Milton Friedman. And he said, look, in today's world, nobody would be able to price a pencil. If you don't have money. If I were to tell you, okay, look, this is a pencil, how much should I charge for it? It's impossible for a person to come up with that value because the inputs into creating a pencil are so diverse that unless you have something that captures that value at all these different levels and then can pass it along, it's impossible for a person to just go out and figure it out. So you can see here, like, okay, I don't know, the paint on the pencil, you have to drill oil, refine it, make the paint, the graphite, you have to mine coal and whatnot, you have to log trees, you have to take sap from the rubber tree. How the heck am I going to keep track of how much value each one of these elements brings? And money somehow captures all that. So it's a very, very powerful agent in our environment that allows us to transfer information with very little friction. And this allowed our society to expand very rapidly. So it's to me, everything, so I'm going to go pros and cons. There's nothing here that it's like, okay, this is immediately evil or this is immediately angelic. It's every time it's kind of like, it has both benefits and detriments. And at the end, I'm going to talk about maybe how can we think about that. So a very, very important use of money. Another one that I think it's interesting to me is money allows you to somewhat decouple yourself from society. If you have enough money, you can do whatever you want. I can be, I don't know, I call them cybernetic nomads. There's people in the Silicon Valley, I have a few $1 million in the bank, 5 million, and they travel the world, they do whatever they feel like it. They do not need to couple back to the society. The money gives them, they can isolate themselves from that. But it's an interesting isolation because the money's allowing you to quantify. So a lot of times when I think what makes our society, and I feel like it's the relationships we have with each other. And these relationships, we develop them through, I would call maybe debts of some kind. So you can think about, I'm in debt to my parents. They took care of me when I was a kid, but that is not quantified in a way. But money allows you to quantify that, and it allows you to more or less zero it, to settle the debt. And by settling it, you have become now independent. You have no more constraints. If you guys are interested, there's a very good book, David Graeber. He's an anthropologist. I'm not sure if anybody knows about him. He's the guy who started the Wall Street, the counter Wall Street movement. He's an anarcho-anthropologist, very interesting character. He died, I think, during COVID. I don't think he died because of COVID, but he has very, very interesting books. The freedom to me, though, so this freedom, the freedom that money allows you to have is, it can make you lose yourself very quickly. And I have this little video. So this is me kind of, I'm a big fan of anime. Here, let's see if this works. Uh-oh, I don't have audio. Come on. Oh yeah, we do have some.
何者にも束縛されない自由の世界だよ。これが自由。そう、自由の世界。その代わりに何もない。僕が考えない限り。そう、あなたが考えない限り。そんな、どうしたらいいのかわかんないよ。不安なのね。自分のイメージがないのね。漠然としすぎてる。何もつかめない世界。
君の好きにしていい世界。
けど、あなたは不安なのね。
どうしたらいいのかわからないのかね。
どうしたらいいんですか。
不自由をやろう。
ほら、これで天地ができたわ。でもこれで自由が一つ消えた。あなたは地に立たなければならない。
だが、君は安心する。
自分の心が少し楽になったから。
そして歩いてみる。
それはあなたの意志。これは僕の意志。
世界に地が存在するのはあなたの周りの世界。
せやけど、お前は自由に動けるんや。その気になれば世界の位置を変えることもできるさ。
そして世界の位置も常に同じところではないの。
時の流れとともに変わっていくものさ。
君自身も変わることができる。
お前をかたどっているのはお前自身の心とその周りの世界だからな。
だってこれはあなたの世界ですもの。
あなたが捉えている現実の形なのよ。これは何もない空間、何もない世界。僕の他には何もない世界。僕がよくわからなくなっていく。自分がなくなっていく感じ。僕という存在が消えていく。ここにはあなたしかいないからよ。僕しかいないから。自分以外の存在がないとあなたは自分の形がわからないからよ。自分の形。そう、他の人の形を見ることで自分の形を知っている。他の人との壁を見ることで自分の形をイメージしている。あなたは他の人がいないと自分が見えないの。他の人がいるから自分がいられるんじゃないか。一人はどこまで行っても一人じゃないか。世界はみんな僕だけだ。他人との違いを認識することで自分をかたどっているのね。一番最初の他人は母親。母親はあなたとは違う人間なのよ。そう、僕は僕だ。ただ他の人たちが僕の心の形を作っているのも確かなんだ。そうよ、碇シンジ君。やっとわかったの？バカシンジ。
Sorry. Okay. Uh-oh. What happened? Uh-oh. Now I lost. Hopefully it's gone. So my point here is that these are interesting. So the artists, I feel like they have a lot of insight into these concepts. But to me, the meaning we have with our world is through the relationships we develop with our world. And ultimate freedom means you have no responsibilities, very few relationships with the world. And you can do whatever you want, but you'll have no meaning. If you want to have meaning, you won't be able to do whatever you want. So there's this kind of constant tug of war between, do I want to have meaning in my world, or do I want to have freedom in my world? Can I move freely or not? I think with money, you can very, very easily decouple yourself from everybody else, and you'll feel free. But I think you'll also feel very meaningless. So what I'm trying to, come on, done. Another thing that I want to talk about is, so I think I said, with that, another use of money, and this is kind of an interesting one, I talked about you can develop all kinds of infrastructure, so you can create money and use it to improve the status of others around you. A lot of times you can also, this is what, so I told you 1100, the Song dynasty created money. Then the Mongols came, Kublai Khan, I don't know if you guys know him, he's the grandson of Genghis Khan. He came by, he's like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna make my own money. And if you don't use my own money, I'll kill you. So everybody had to pay taxes to Kublai Khan in the currency that Kublai Khan came up with. So you had to work, and then with the value that you're generating, you had to kind of give it to the king. Very, very similar concepts, approaches. The Europeans, the Western Europeans kind of took in when they colonized most of the world. So there was one that kind of stands out, I think in the Madagascar and also the Belgian Congo. The Belgians the people are like, look, I'm living my own life here. I don't need your money. I have my own ways to value things. But then the colonizers were like, okay, we'll come in and we'll ask you to pay taxes in this currency. And the way you get this currency is by working for us. So there's a way to restrict the actions you had and concentrate them on the things that somebody feels valuable. And nowadays, we don't think a bit about that. But when you are born, and when I am born in this society. And I am born in I have to adopt the value system and the kind of social system that this society has. And it's a lot of times imposed through these structures of money. So I have to pay taxes of some sort, or I have to give money to someone. So then I have to go into this system. David Graeber was talking about how before money existed, and he discusses kind of the North American culture, you could travel from one side of the continent to another on foot, and the native people actually did this. There was this idea of, okay, I have a dream and I have to make my dream true. And because nobody had, the money concept was very fluid, you didn't have to kind of pay taxes or and you would interact with people and you'd just create relationships in the moment, and you would have to kind of provide back and forth valuable, it wasn't, you wouldn't be able to translate, it was valuable actions. I would help you with this, or I'll give you some of this that I got from over there. What the heck is beeping like that? Something, okay. I'm sorry? The dishwasher. Okay. So I think we lost a lot of that interpersonal, qualitative kind of idea of relationships, and now it has all been kind of replaced by this very efficient way of transferring information. So now talking about a bit of value. So you might have heard about these, and there's two of them, objective and subjective value. You might have heard of the invisible hand of the market, hopefully. So this was a concept, I think, from the 1800s. And the idea was that, okay, the system itself balances itself so that the value that's being representing the cost of an item is actually capturing all these processes that created that item of some sort. There's also the invisible foot of the market, and this was a Nobel Prize in the 1970s. Maybe you haven't heard of the invisible foot. This was the idea that we are bounded rationally, so we don't think, we don't optimize to any degree. We just say, okay, after a certain amount of thinking about what this should be assessed at, I stop thinking. It's like it's not worth for me to kind of go too deep into this. And with that bounded rationality, I think a lot of times what we do is we ignore what are called externalities. So it's when you create some item, you can maybe include in the price, okay, I had to drill for oil, and that this is, or something, I had to extract some resource, and this is how much extracting that resource was, but you don't account for how much oxygen did I use from the atmosphere, because it's plentiful, and that's an externality that I don't include in terms of my price. And with bounded rationality, you can very easily kind of, well, I don't really care about that. It's so much that I don't have to account for it. But I think as we grow to planetary scale, these externalities are going to start becoming very important. So that's one way to assess value. So the value reflects how much energy and materials you put in the product you created. This type of value, and I call this value type A, more or less kind of disappeared. I think we are living in what's called the age of plentiness, so where you have a lot of access to a lot of different resources, and it no longer, the value that you have for certain items, it's no longer representing the expense that you had to undergo to create it. It's much more about how much are you willing to pay for it. And this is how you get these very interesting fashion accessories that are literally costing very little, and you can sell them for a lot, because the person who wants it, they say, oh, for me, this is worth a lot. I also think, like, for example, I'm thinking like for a piano. For me, a piano has very little value because I don't know how to use it. But for a pianist who can literally change people's emotions with it, it's probably extremely valuable. So you have these, depending on who's using it, you have different values. There's also a third type. This is a very strange one to me. Well, not strange one. I think it's the essential one that we kind of lost. We talk about value, but we don't talk about the values that we have. And I think it's become one of these things where the market value is becoming kind of what we think is the actual value of the item we have. And it's, for certain elements, that is very, very dangerous in a way. So this is, you guys probably know Mark Carney. Oh no, here. So Mark Carney, the governor, was the governor of Canada, the governor of Bank of England, our prime minister. He has a very a good book, Values, I think, where he discusses this, how the market principles kind of took over the concept of values we had before. And this is, I'm trying to capture these ideas somehow. So this was how I thought, I was thinking like our society was kind of representing values. And we had, this is just my imagination, but we had multiple dimensions on which we were assessing value. So it was like, okay, my relationships with my immediate family, you had religion, that kind of gave you some structures in the world, some meaning. There was the market value, so okay, things that I can buy and sell. But you had many different dimensions. I think as time progressed and as things became more and more efficient, everything now is the value that we assess things on is based only on the market value. And it's very difficult kind of to find balance. A lot of times that market value doesn't map onto, at some point in your life it does map on your vector of progress, but a lot of time it doesn't. And you'll feel this, whatever people perceive as valuable has no meaning to me. Or maybe you won't feel it right now. At some point you might. But that to me is because we've lost all these other dimensions that value was kind of projected on. And maybe we can come back to them in some way. I've had this picture here. If something is captured in the market, it has value. If it's not captured in the market, it actually has no value, even though it's extremely valuable. And again, like I'm thinking back to what is the user manual we are going to use to run this planet-sized spaceship, and how do we capture this? And a lot of times you're thinking like, oh, these guys are good and these guys are bad. In my mind, we can't. That doesn't help make any progress. So we have to think about it differently. I like this is from a book from an MIT prof. The difference between kind of a tribe from Orinoco River in the Amazon, how they see value and how we see value. So from our perspective, kind of I have access. So my daily activities are maybe not. I mean, I do like bubble tea, but they are. I'm living in a different environments than them, and you can look at these different comparison metrics here. But you might think that these are very different. Okay, I live among 2 million people, and they live among 50 to 250. I make $50,000 a year, and they make $100 a year. But all of these are not as important as this other one here, the last one. So the value, I think, if you consider somehow that the Vancouverites they have more access to value than the Yanomamo people, is because I think we have access to, through the system, the market system and the global system, we have access with whatever money I have. And I mean, the money here the difference is not that large. So I only have like 500x more than them. But in the amounts of products I have access to, in each one of these products kind of gives me different types of freedoms. I have 1 billion times more freedoms than them. So I can do many, many, many more things than them. In that way, we feel, okay, we have more control on our environment in a way. So value is a very strange concept that I think we have to understand a bit better. Going back to like what is money, and I think I was talking about, okay, you can use this as a unit of accounting, you can use it to trade different things with it. This is the idea of you can store, if you have a unit of accounting, I can store things. And the storage, again, it's a strange one to me because it makes things, I don't know if you've heard of the concept fungible. So where you can trade it for money. So if I give you a cow that's $100 or something, I expect to buy back a cow for $100, but I give you one cow and they give me a different cow. At a certain level, the cows are the same, but at another level, they are very, very different. Or somebody gives me $100 for parking to, I don't know, go to a hospital because they have a very traumatic injury. Somebody gives me, $100 for much more they give me $10 to park to go to a hospital because they are injured. Somebody else gives me $10 to park because they want to walk in the park. Those have I paid the exact same price, but they have very different connotations, and money somehow erases these differences. So the storage of value, it's a very abstract, and a lot of times I feel like we think that if I gave you like I sold you apples for $100 and I want them in the future for $100, if we have no more apples around, the apples you sold me for $100, so maybe apples rot away. So if I don't use them right away, the $100 I gave you for the apples is kind of, should I erase that? From the economy, it has disappeared if the apples have rotted away. But the system doesn't have enough feedback. These are kind of old or I don't know, normal ways of thinking about money. This is how I'm trying to somehow project on my mind how I should think about money. And in a way, at some point, I feel like money is in a representation of social obligations that we have amongst each other. Like if money makes no sense to another animal, it's only a human concept. I feel like in the future, most money is going to be very much mapped onto how much energy you have available, like energy in terms of joules, like literal energy. And energy is going to be used to be able to change reality around you. And also, I think money somehow is going to be, and this idea of information is it's like a catalyst. It allows you to traverse the reality in different ways. If you understand how reality works, I can very much shortcut things and create things from nothing that if I know how things work. So money, in my mind, will somehow capture some of these ideas. All this being said, so I've shown this plot in the last lecture. We have the underlying value of our society. Some of it is capturing, all of it is capturing what we think is valuable, but we have a lot of externalities here, so concepts that we are not capturing. And then money is very much kind of trying to map those concepts. So now, everything I'm saying here is kind of trying to wrap up the previous lecture. So what can we do after money? So there's different ways you can think about this. This is, I think, Ikigai. You might have heard this concept. What would you want to do with your life? And there's these okay, what do I like? What am I good at? What does the world need? And what can I be paid for? And ideally, you would kind of come up with something that is at the intersection of these different capabilities. My hope is that by becoming financially independent, you remove that circle about what can I be paid for, and then you can focus on these other concepts I think are much more meaningful in your life. There was very interesting. So if you go to the Personal Finance Canada subreddit, there's a lot of money being made in Alberta, and there's a lot of people who are having like life crisis about like I'm making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and my life feels meaningless, and what I haven't saved anything, and I'm feeling like I'm in a constant rat race. And somebody wrote there something about don't spend frivolously, build good habits now, and just save and invest whatever you can. I know it can be hard with peer pressure, but try to resist it. If you think it's hard right now, peer pressure up in the oil patch is a different story. Boats, jet skis, fifth wheelers, ATVs, dirt bikes, fully loaded 3500. This is the Ram trucks, vacations, tropical hundreds, etc. So I feel like a lot of times I'm being projected this reality that I need all these things to feel happy, but that is just kind of the system around me trying to engage me in it, to extract the value or aligning my value with itself, and then I can push in the same direction. I feel you can almost like surf the system. So instead of going in the direction of the wave, you go on the wave and you go in a different direction by becoming financially independent. But that requires a lot of discipline. Because if you're not careful, when you surf a wave, you will start being taken by the wave and moved in the direction of its traveling instead of in the direction you want to travel. So I've seen this over and over again. Because money is a very unique number and you can optimize it, it's very easy to kind of just be like, hey, I'm going to keep making more and more money. It's like you can very easily find a gradient of making more money. And after some point, it's losing its meaning. But I think a lot of times, and I see a lot of very wealthy individuals who are very, how do I describe it? Depressed, maybe. They lost their meaning in their social circle or in their social life. And to me, the most of the value we have is not in the money we have. It's in everything else. So yeah, those are the dimensions that provide meaning. There's the science fiction author, Robert Heinlein. He wrote a few interesting novels. If you heard about SpaceX trying to launch satellites, not satellites, they have a, what do they call it? The mass, they want to launch satellites from the moon using an electromagnetic railgun. That idea was in one, or I think in the Moon is a Harsh Mistress novel by Robert Heinlein. But he has this definition of what should a human, like what is a human? And he has all these like change a diaper, plan an invasion. A human should be able to do this. Butcher a hog, con a ship, so that means sail a ship. Design a building, write a sonnet, all these ideas, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. And then I added some more here: harvest crops, take care of animals, preserve food, be a good partner, raise children, care for parents, learn new skills, teach somebody else something. This is going to be interesting. Navigate the unknown, and the unknown I think is going to come at us very quickly. I think you also have to have fun, like learn how to relax when things are very crazy around you. And then I have this one, run a planet. We'll see if we can get to this one. Remember these plots? This is kind of like, I'm realizing one thing that I haven't mentioned is, when I look at these, what I see is, from 0 to 5, you learn literally how to map your body onto your mind. Oh, I have an arm. I haven't hit myself in the face with my arm. Probably from 5 to 15, 16, maybe 18, you learn how to socialize with others around you. You learn like, hey, it's not just me in the world. I have to be able to interact with others. Others have wants, I have wants. We have to somehow create, maybe from 15 to 20 something, you have to somehow learn some techniques that allow you to operate effectively in society. But at the same time, like, can you do 20 to what is the time where you can learn how to run a planet? I have no idea. Like, these scales are like, I learn how to use my hands. I learn how to operate in the environment around others. And all of a sudden, you go to like 1 million or 1 billion level of difficulty. I learn how to operate a planet. How the heck do we do that? So that's where I'm a bit. There's not many answers here. It's kind of more questions. I don't have a lot of people to talk about this, so what I do is I try to read a lot of books. This was a book by Catherine Graham. She's the first woman CEO in the Western, well, the first woman CEO in the world. She owned the Wall Street Journal in the 1970s. And her dad was, what's his name? Can't remember his name. Her dad was the first president of the World Bank. And her dad came up with this kind of plan of what should a human do with their life. So, okay, the first 20 years, you go to school, learn how to do things. Then you develop a competency and you kind of come up with a family. Then you kind of spin on that, become better and better at it. And then at some point, you start to kind of try to educate others. I don't know if this still, I don't think it works anymore. We'll see how this progresses. But it's kind of like a reference of how somebody maybe 80 years ago was thinking about what is an effective life. And I think this is becoming a bit more obsolete now. I also look at, this is me kind of looking at, not only me, everything I'm showing here is for like somebody showed this plot and I was like, wait, where does this plot come from? So this is how much time American people spend with different groups in their life. And this is their age from 15 to 80 and how much time they spend with different people. So 4 hours a day they spend, and you can see by the time they're 80, 8 hours a day alone. When they are their professional life here, this is with their children in brown here, kind of between the age of, let's say, 25 to maybe 55, they spend a lot of time with their children, with their partner. When they are getting older, they spend more time with their partner. I think with coworkers, kind of stays fairly constant. Where is it with coworkers? Sorry, it's this other brown one, reddish brown one. So this is how we allocate our time, and in some way, our time is kind of our attention, and this is probably somehow how we maybe can derive some meaning from our lives. I like to see this kind of between men and women. This is, again, a personal anecdote from my observations. There's a part that I'm kind of, maybe a bit of background. So my wife, she's a physician, and just after she started her residency, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm very curious. Should I keep working, or should you become the you'll be making all the money and then just follow you around? So what I did was I went on in British Columbia, you can find the salaries of doctors and their location of where they work. So I literally went on websites, and I think I had like, I don't know, probably like 20,000 doctors across the province. This was before anything was, what I wanted to know was like, where do doctors make a lot of money? And can women make a lot more money, or just about as much money as men? And it turned out, this was 2016, and I kind of did it on my own, and I was like, because this was very important, like it was between me and my wife, so I was like, hey, how the heck is this gonna work? And it turned out that actually women doctors make 36% less than male doctors. And I was like, what the heck does this mean? Because so she's a general practitioner, as a family doctor, and they, as a general practitioner, more or less bill the same way both men and women bill the same way. So like, I have a code, I bill like this, it doesn't matter, the system doesn't know if I'm a man or a woman. Then I realized, you know what? It's probably because women will have to take care of their kids, and kids are literally an externality that's not included. I mean, there's other reasons, but that's not included in this. And to me, like, I think a kid is probably worth about, this is my personal opinion, probably around $100,000 a year. And this is nowhere captured in our economical system. The interesting part here was, so this was me, this is not my plots. I have my own plots, but I was like, okay, I can't really trust maybe I've missed something. In 2017, there was so I did it in 2016, and I still have my plots, and then I kept looking, why is nobody looking at this data? In 2017, there was a BC, and I put all the references here. BC studies showing the same thing, and I was like, okay, yeah, my numbers weren't. And it was crazy, because I think the only physicians that were making more as women than men was OBGYN, and it was a very marginal improvement. So the system is not, it's not that, so women, I think, from talking to other friends that are also doctors, a lot of times when you have a kid, and let's say both the husband and the wife are doctors, it's the husband that stays working and the woman doesn't. And also, I think women are way more kind of methodical and attention-oriented with their patients than men. And men kind of just go through patients fast, like very fast, and women take their time. So in a way that there's other dimensions here that cause a discrepancy, but a lot of times I feel like there's externalities in our system that don't capture this. So I was like, okay, things are not panning out as we thought, so we'll think about this some more. A very interesting trend though, more recently, and this trend is kind of continuing, male doctors are making, it's not they're working less, they're making less because they work less. This is gonna impact kind of our medical system, this is just as an aside. And I think this started around 2019 with COVID, where I think a lot of people realized, though, there's other valuable things that I can do with my life, so maybe I shouldn't become a workaholic. So, FYI, when you think about, okay, men are making more than women, or it's not like the billing codes can be adjusted so that they make the same. Even if the billing codes are the same, there's some parts of the system that's not capturing the value that is being added. When I think about kind of this is my personal kind of what's valuable and meaningful to me. I have these milestones in my mind that are somewhat important. Okay, I'm being born, I have no memory of that. But finding a life partner, or maybe a few times you'll find partners, this is probably an important milestone. Having children is probably an important milestone. And I don't know how many of you still have grandparents around. Maybe I hope this most of you, but who knows what the future is going to become very strange. A lot of people now have children later in life, and by the time the children is 10, the grandparents die. So the child has no memory or very few memories with the grandparents. Grandparents die, then the parents die. Maybe I'm not sure what the order here is. The grandchildren are born, and either me or the partner dies. These are important milestones that can make or destroy a lot of meaning in my life. And I'm trying to kind of create valuable savings in my meaning, and this is kind of through memories and kind of things that I create in my environment and relationships I develop that allow me to navigate these different, I'll call them seasons. There's I think a very good book, The 5 Types of Wealth. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of it. This is I don't know why East Indians have very good insight into these ideas. Sahil Bloom, so he's a hedge fund manager. He had a insightful revelation. He was making probably like a few $1 million a year. And at some point, I think one of his partners, he was living on the West Coast, and his parents were living on the East Coast. I think they had a discussion where this business partner was like, "Oh, okay, so how often do you see your parents?" And this guy was like, "Oh, I see them once a year." And he's like, "Oh, and how old are they?" And they're like, he's like, "Oh, they're 65." And this guy's like, "Oh, I see. So you'll see them another maybe 10 years, and then they'll die." And this guy's like, "What?" Well, it's obvious. Like they live about from 65 to about 75 I think in the US, or maybe 80, maybe 15 times. And if you see them once a year, you'll only see them another 10 times from now. And then this guy was like, "Oh, wait, what? That is true." And then he literally stopped everything he was doing, and he was like, "My parents are very important to me. They give meaning to my life. I'm gonna restructure everything I do so that I bring them closer, and I can see them more than 10 to 15 times in the rest of my life." And I'm not sure if he closed or he sold his business. He moved on the East Coast, and now he has a different type of life. But this book that he wrote, after that he wrote this book, The 5 Types of Wealth, I think captures a lot of concepts that I also kind of resonate with, and in my mind I kind of adhere to. He projects it on a few different dimensions, so 5 types. In my mind I kind of have these, you might have heard of these ideas, life accounts. You're saving in different types of life accounts, so you want to make sure that you're attending all your different life accounts, not just one. So a lot of times when you're young, you're focusing on your expertise life account, so professionally and kind of my technical, how good am I? But it might be at the detriment of your health, your mental health or physical health, or your relationships, like the family relationships or kind of your friends. I think it's important to be able to kind of transition from one to another. So if you see yourself kind of working too much on one, you have to kind of take a step back, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to just be like, hey, I'm going to stop working, because a lot of times you've somehow committed yourself to do that work. And this is again where I think if you become financially independent, you will have much easier time to change your focus from one to another. It doesn't mean that you will no longer develop your expertise account, but you have the freedom to choose when to do it and when to not. And becoming financially independent means that you forego some other types of freedoms in a way. So if you want to try something out to read, maybe this is a very good book to just kind of give a snapshot of, I guess, what it means to be human in some way. But to me, like a lot of the self-help books, I don't know what to call them, they more or less stop here. So if you have developed these life accounts and you can manage them well, you can live happily ever after, whatever. But I think we have to kind of go beyond just the human. We have to look kind of further than that. And this is where things I'm gonna kind of kick it up a notch. Okay, so first I'll start with techno-capitalism. So this is back to this idea of the subjective definition of value. So the value is how much I'm willing to pay. It doesn't matter how much it costs you to create it or how much, like the value that it has for society. It's how much I'm willing to pay. And a lot of times I think that is this directly created this consumer society. If I can make you want this a lot, I can ask for a very exorbitant price. I can get you to go in debt for this thing. So in my mind, the price of things and the value of things is very closely related to desires. And I came up with this equation that I use here. The total economic value is the amount of desire somebody has per person, the number of people you have, and then, oh shoot, there is a divide by availability here. So if there's high availability, then the value is low. If there's low availability, then the value is high. So you can increase the value of things by technological advancements. So this is, you can create, and I'll talk a bit about this in a sec. You can create new things there's not a lot of availability of things. I can change it, kind of psychological advancements here. So I can make you want things more. And that's what marketing does. It literally, psychological techniques for getting you to want something. When you see Nike, and the quintessential example was the Camel cigarettes in the 1920s. They were advertising to, there was this whole emancipation of women, and the Camel cigarettes were like, oh, you know what? If you're a woman, you can smoke cigarettes freely, and that kind of shows that you are independent of anybody else's wants. And they projected this idea: if I want to be free, I have to smoke these cigarettes. And it was like this very strange mapping, but we have biases in how we think about things, and those projections in our mind created desire for you wanting to smoke cigarettes. And then this other part is, okay, if we increase the value, have we reached the saturation? So that we can decrease the availability. We also can decrease the total value of things by having very few people. So right now we are in this exponential growth of population, but I think that's plateauing and is going to start decreasing. Then we'll have less total value in the world because we have less people, and each people is like a unit of desire. So we have less units of desire. We'll see how that progresses. This idea of technological advancements is an interesting one. I kind of always think about, through technology, we create new systems in our world, and when we have these new systems, we create new freedoms that we could attain, and we want to have these freedoms. So I think like I could have an activity here, maybe the activity is motion of some sort, like I translate myself, I circulate from some place to another. And I don't know, millions of years ago, something evolved walking, and that was kind of a technology. But maybe at some point developed sailing boats. So now I want to have a boat. I desire to have that type of freedom. Maybe somebody domesticated a horse. Now I want to have that type of freedom. And you can see how I have more and more desires. And technology literally generates through, we create a new, let's say we can go to the moon now. I've opened a new reservoir of desires. Now everybody, not only do you desire to kind of have a car and I don't know, fly in an airplane, you also now desire to fly out in space. It's like a new dimension on which I can desire things. I've added more value to the society because as a human now I can desire more. This concept was kind of in the 1960s. There was this idea of through technology and kind of manipulating energy, you can open new reservoirs of, it's like an inverse of entropy. Entropy is disorder. What you're creating is channels that allow you to traverse kind of this disorder. You're creating channels of negative entropy that you can kind of traverse through, or entities that are negative entropy that map onto our understanding. So we unlock these reservoirs of negative entropy. I just put this here if you're interested. I think this concept of negative entropy and technology creating negative entropy, I think is going to be a very powerful concept to understanding kind of our reality. The other thing that's happening, this is, everything is moving faster and faster. And what I want to show here was that the adoption of these, you can imagine kind of here, these different freedoms in a way. The adoption of these it's not only that we are generating more freedoms, but through technology we can also adopt them much faster. So I guess this graph is only going up to 2005, but nowadays you'll see like ChatGPT was created. I don't know, it had market saturation of billions of people in probably like a year or two. So very fast adoption rates. So we can technology allows others to access these freedoms quite much faster. This is kind of the plot that I was talking about at the beginning, where again, like these are kind of books that I'm trying to use as references to try to understand my environment. We are going through like an explosion of dimensions on which you can project our desires, and this is making we can have so many different paths that we can take in our life that a lot of times we'll find ourselves being kind of lonely. There's not many other people that want to take the same path, and a lot of times this is kind of captured by I don't know. GDP is a very strange number. So this is the gross domestic product. How many products were kind of traded back and forth between different people? And I'm not sure if that's related to value directly or it's mapping some of the value. The interesting part is the amount of ideas, assets, and other kind of systems that have been traded in the last, let's say, 100 years has like literally gone up like thousands of times, and it's very this literally explosion here is how we are living very differently than our even kind of our great grandparents. Probably our great grandparents felt much more relatable to anybody living kind of 2,000 years ago than they feel to somebody living today. Like if your great grandparents were like riding a horse or something like in a cart somewhere, maybe later in their life, were close to when your grandparents were born, they had access to like, oh, there's a car somewhere on the road. But until very recently, everybody kind of lived in the same type of environment. This idea of desire, so they talked about this here, the psychological systems, it was very explicitly developed. You might have heard of the Great Depression in the 1920s in the United States. It was like clearly, there was a clear moment where this was, okay, we want people to have desires that we want them to desire things they don't need. This was Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was an investment bank that went bankrupt in the 2008 recession. But there was this person, Paul Mazur, said people must be trained to desire, to want new things even before the old have been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality in America. Man's desires must overshadow his needs. And this was because during the Great Depression, people already had, like the farmers, and they had everything they needed. Like, okay, my shoes are kind of dirty, but I can still walk in them. I don't need new shoes. My clothes are kind of not the not the fanciest, but they don't have holes in them. I can still wear them. And people stopped buying things. And then the price because nobody didn't want to buy things, the price of everything started dropping until people were starting to buy, but nobody's buying anything. So then this idea was like, okay, nobody wants to buy anything. Our economy, there was deflationary. Everything is going down in prices. How are we going to incentivize people to consume? So That's where you have like, okay, you bought a car last year, but this car this year has this fancy feature. Now you should buy this new car just because of this fancy feature and kind of dispose of your old car. Veritasium actually has a very good video here. So that was kind of desire. Probably in the around 1960s, 1970s, the engineering design term of kind of planned obsolescence was implemented, and the important, or in my mind, one important moment was there was a company called Douglas Detweiler, I think. It was building airplanes. McDonnell Douglas, I think. It was building airplanes, and they were very, very good airplanes. And these airplanes are still flying today, and they're like 80 years old. They're designed to last forever. Like literally, they were thinking like, we'll make these airplanes designed forever, or not forever, for many, many like decades and decades. And that company went bankrupt because people bought their airplanes. They're like, okay, this airplane still flies. I don't need another one. Boeing in I think the 70s or 80s, they started designing parts that would fail. They were designing parts that fail so you can buy the next airplane. So Veritasium talks about this, how everything nowadays has more or less planned obsolescence in their designs. And also, well, maybe we'll see how things progress, but they also are designed so that you can't very easily repair them. When I was a kid, I remember, okay, the TV broke. We didn't buy a new TV. There was a guy who came and fixed the TV, and he had this little wax thing that he put in in a little hole, and he put his stamp there, so you couldn't open the TV to fix it yourself, and if you did open it to fix it yourself, you would lose your warranty because he didn't fix it himself. But nobody fixes things anymore. You literally just dispose of it because it's too hard to repair. So these are systems that have been put into place to allow us to kind of generate new technologies in a way. So they are valuable in the sense that people have to put their energy and money into new systems, and they can't use the old systems. But they're kind of the con there is that now you have to literally constantly generate new assets to be able to live. There's a documentary on Adam Curtis that I highly encourage you guys to, if you have time, to watch. He makes these very unique videos that are also very eccentric perspectives on how we live in our societies. And I think a very interesting one is the century of the self. And this how before societies, like before, maybe 1800s or not, a lot of the social circles were very diffused among. So I would present a lot of value on my relationships with others. I wouldn't see myself too highly. But I think this is actually allowed the Western world. So then there was a shift to, okay, personal freedom, and just I am the most important person. I can do whatever I want. Like I have control of my environment. I'm kind of the captain of the ship, and I don't really care what other people are saying. In a way, that allowed us to have very unique visionaries that were able to push the technology very far into the future. But at the same time, we kind of lost our relationships with others. There's some interesting analysis, I think it's done by NASA, where they discussed about how you have to have different types of astronauts depending on the environment you live in. So they have, they talk about like when you start an exploration, you want to have kind of cowboys in space. You want to have people that are not afraid to kind of live on their own and kind of take things in their own hands. But a lot of times, once you've reached that kind of, you've managed to create a bridge between two different environments, then it's important to kind of bring in people that, so the example they gave was kind of like the American versus the Japanese society. And the Japanese society is much more in tune with how others feel about each other. So it's like, okay, we have the, social norms that are taking into account, trying to maintain balance in society rather than you being an individual that kind of is on its own. So depending on which environment you are, the cowboy mentality and kind of, or more kind of more individualistic or more social mentality might be more beneficial. Okay, so this is, whoops, come on. If you want to watch the Veritasium video, this is a very interesting one. He talks about light bulbs, because we can make light bulbs that last for decades, but we don't. And we don't, so you can buy more. So it's an interesting concept here. I'm gonna shift gears a bit here. I'm gonna talk a bit about AI, because I think a lot of times things are moving very fast there, and I want to kind of give you a glimpse of this. This is how I kind of see how you can use the AI in a fairly personal way, and it's used in a way in which it accelerates your rate of learning. It's fairly, I think it's complicated to use it like this, but I just wanted you guys to see how I think about it. So I personally am creating, I feel like it's very important to own my own data and to own my own, to have control over my information. I think a lot of times nowadays, a lot of people don't even realize they've lost control of their own data. A lot of things are in the cloud, and there's these big systems that have access to it, and you have, at some point, I think if you read their terms and conditions, they can take away all your access and you've lost all the data. So you've probably heard me talk about this in Interface 353. I use Obsidian, and I think a lot of you, or some of you are using it to keep track of everything I ingest informationally. Obsidian has so when I read news articles, I like to kind of keep track of everything. The things I read and the things I'm interested in. I use a plugin in my web browser that I can click on a button. It's like very easy, very low friction. I click on a button, and then the entire article that I'm interested in goes into Obsidian. And it goes into Obsidian in an unread folder. As soon as I read in Obsidian, and I put it in a read folder. In the read folder, I'm trying to somehow flag the AI about things that I know of. So I'm interested in something, I haven't read the article, and then if I read the article, I actually know about something that's somehow in my mind. I'm aware, I'm more deeply aware of the items, that the information in there. You can also, I'm not sure if you know about this app called Anki. It's a flashcard, so you can read a question or some sort of statement, and you say, yes, I remember this, or I don't. And it's spaced repetition, so if you don't remember it, it's going to show it to you very soon. If you do remember it, it's going to show it to you later. And this, if you have these systems, so this allows AI somehow to know what I'm interested in. It knows what I'm aware of, and it also knows how well am I aware of it. Like, do I know it fairly well, or do I know it kind of vaguely? And then when I try to learn a new concept, let's say, I don't know, I'm studying, in the example I give you, so I think one of you, Gabe here, he was studying for Math 400, and he has this system in place. I'm not sure if he has the exact same thing, but he's using Obsidian and Anki, and he has what's called a forever deck. This is all the information that I want to know about. And when he started studying Math 400, he literally took the Math 400 curriculum, put in the AI, and said, okay, explain all of this as if I am Meaty. You don't say explain all of this as if I'm 5. You say explain all of this as if I'm this person who knows these things. And then you can use these AIs in a very powerful way that you have customized to your own knowledge framework. And they can project this knowledge back at you in a very compatible way with your mental framework. I'm not sure if this makes any sense. But I think you can take these AIs, instead of using them kind of very superficially to explore different things, you can use them to augment your abilities to learn. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. So yeah, own the model to empower yourself, and you have to control it. What I like about these, so I don't know if you know about this Gemma, Quen, there's all these models you can download locally. And if you download locally, you can literally control their parameters. You can say, I want answers that are more random or less random. You have access to a lot of knobs in the models. This is fairly advanced, but I think this is, to me, like, if you can get this to work, you will become 10x or 100x better at learning. So that angle, the rate of learning is going to become much better, and hopefully you can, across your lifetime, you'll learn more. I just put it this here so you guys can see it. So this is literally, I was reading about miniature magnet rivals behemoth. This is, I think, was the 20 Tesla magnet from MIT. And I put this article and I said, okay, I've read about this, I know about it. So now when the AI responds, provides answers to some question I have, it will know that, hey, he knows about this. So I can reference this in my answers. Yeah, that's the term. I think there's a lot of, darn it. So this, yeah, I mentioned all of these things. So this angle here, the rate of learning, if you use these systems, you can increase it a lot. You just have to be very, very careful. You control it, because if you don't, and if you feel like you understand it, so a lot of times I always ask myself, what is the point where I think, yes, I understand it? Because you can just be like, oh yeah, I superficially understand, it's good enough, and you can move on. And that is, I call it the understanding debt. So you can do it a bit, but the deeper you push this debt into the future, the more of this debt accumulates, and at some point you will no longer understand things. And I have this, it's a Faustian bargain, so you probably heard about, Goethe had this like poem with some poor soul traded his soul for, with the devil for getting a lot of power. And it's the same, I think, with these AIs. You can trade a lot to get a lot of power, but you lose all their abilities to control it. I think a lot of I've heard of all these complaints about, okay, isn't it dangerous to use AIs? And there are a few different types of dangers that you can think about. I've seen a lot of people nowadays, you've probably heard about these agentic AIs where they can act on your behalf. And there's lots of people that started using them without actually knowing how they work, so without sandboxing them properly. And these are a lot of technological concepts that it's very difficult as a person who's not trained into this to all of a sudden adopt it. Like, oh yeah, I want to, start a company and I know that these agentic AIs can work for me. I'm just going to use them like I saw on a post. But that post doesn't provide all the details, and a lot of times it might delete all your emails, or it might all of a sudden start trading on your behalf and lose all your money and whatnot. There's a lot of dangers with privacy where you disclose a lot of information and you lose the control of your personal information. There's a lot of discussion about, okay, these AIs are biased in some way. My feel is that, you've heard me talk about this, there's no way to control bias. There's no way to remove bias. The only thing we can do is kind of project it on orthogonal values of our society. So bias is an engineer. You are trained to see the world in a certain way. That is a biased way. It's the engineered biased way. You look at the world with the lens of where is the energy, where are the fields, what is the force that's being applied. And these particular perspectives introduce bias in how you filter reality. And ideally, those perspectives are not against the values of your social system. The social system, though, changes. So in 100 years from now, whatever you thought that today is the social norms, in the future might not be, and all of a sudden now what you thought were orthogonal biases to your society are probably against or for the values of society. And then I also heard this idea of, it is valuable. Using AI is going to be using a lot of energy, and maybe I shouldn't use AI. And my feel is that as a technologist, as an engineer, we should be the ones who are very much trying to take advantage of these AIs to improve the world. We shouldn't be if we don't do it, most of the AIs are going to be used to discuss, all kinds of trivial things. And I saw, like, for example, that there was an article showing that with these, not only LLMs, but with deep neural networks, you can improve weather forecasts. If you look at the biggest weather forecast systems that are being run on supercomputers, and if you have very good AI systems, they can reduce the energy use on the order of 20x in running a weather model to predict the weather in the next 2 weeks or something. So you can actually get energy improvements if you use the AIs appropriately. And I always have this. You always have to be careful when you talk about energy, because a lot of times you'll be like, oh, I'm saving energy by not taking the train or like a car to work. But then if you fly a lot, that energy usage is many, many orders of magnitude more than the energy you save during your daily life. So there's all these nuances. And so my feel is that as a technologist, you have to become experienced using these models and try to use them in a very impactful way. So talking a bit about energy, this was, I think, there's a Stephen Keen, he's an Australian economist, and I think until probably like the 2000s, most of the people are talking about the capitalist system, or like the market system consists of two elements, the labor and capital. And then now we are also talking about the market system is consisting of labor, capital, and energy. And energy usage, and you've seen this probably, because I've shown it 3x3, we are growing our energy in another exponential. We are doubling the energy use on Earth every 30 years. And right now, I think I'll have a slide here in a sec. We'll be reaching a limit fairly quickly if we don't think about it carefully. I like to. So this one I just updated right now. Maybe I should have shown you the older version from 40 years ago. So on average, a human, depending on where you live in the world, you lose different amounts of energy. I think Americans and Canadians are using the most, or top 3 kind of. An American uses about 200 kilowatt hours of energy per day. German is using around 100. Chinese is also using around 100, and this is only in the last 5 years. Before, Chinese were not using this much energy. My personal feel is that I think our world can probably support everybody using about 200, so 7 billion people, but we'll see how this moves along. When I look at these systems, the way I interpret it is a human, let's say back in the close to Stone Age, or maybe like, I don't know, 3,000 years ago, we would use every day about 2.2 kilowatts hours. So now as a human, as human living in this technological advanced society, I use about 100 times, more or less, the amount of energy that somebody living 2,000 years ago used. So I have at my disposal, kind of invisibly, 100 other people working for me. I don't know exactly what that does. Most of the time, I think they're more or less kind of there to entertain me. But we'll see how that kind of progresses. And here is like me, kind of how I came up with these numbers. And I've tried to put different references here. When I look at these numbers, I always try to get a feel for like, what does this mean? Like, what is it? I have to have a gut feel for it. So I don't know if this is, I was thinking like, hey, how the heck am I capturing how much an American uses per day? I was trying to get a feel for it. So I was looking at Lionsgate Bridge. It's about a 1 kilometer long bridge. People drive more or less kind of at 80 kilometers an hour on it. And if you drive a gasoline car, the bridge uses about 3.5 megawatts. So just by cars driving around. And if you look at how much, so an American uses 200 kilowatt of hours of energy a day, and that means that they are using 8 kilowatts. So that's the rate of the energy, the power. And it means that if I see about the cars that are on Lionsgate Bridge driving, those cars will support about 420 Americans. I was trying to get a feel for like, okay, so energy, okay, I can see cars moving along, and all that energy that they're generating to move along on the span of Lionsgate Bridge, that will support about 420 Americans in their daily life. A different one here, I was looking at, okay, we use as a society, and actually this number is from 2025. I should have shown you the 2020 number. And these numbers are creeping up. So they are being updated and they're going up. So now I was thinking about at 180 terawatts hours of energy a year, what does that mean? What's something intuitive about that? I have this one. So I was looking at what is the total arsenal, like what is all the energy that's contained in all the nuclear bombs in the world. And 180 terawatt hours that we use every year would mean that it's not the power, it's the energy. It would mean like we are detonating 30 nuclear total arsenals without, don't think about the radioactive fallout, but it's just the energy of 30 times all the nuclear weapons in the world. We are detonating them every year. This is me just trying to capture what these numbers mean. Because if you just give those numbers, I'm like, I have no idea what that is. So 180 terawatts also means there was an asteroid that hit Earth. And this was 64 million years ago and killed all the dinosaurs. And all that energy that was in that asteroid, so us using 180,000 terawatt hours is about 0.16 of that, or sorry, 0.14, depending on, of the power of the energy of that asteroid. And that was an event that probably killed most of the living entities on Earth. It's also, and you probably, so this is growing exponentially, and I think most of you know about this right now. When you look at exponential growth, you have very poor intuition of how it kind of develops. And there's this idea of if you have bacteria growing in a petri dish and they double
Bacteria reproduce very simply.
They double every 5 minutes. And you say, okay, at 11 o'clock, I start the bacteria doubling, and by 12 o'clock, the dish is full. When is the dish half full? You have to be very careful and think about if the doubling rate is 5 minutes, it's not like the dish is full at 11:30 it's full at 11:55, 5 minutes before 12 o'clock. So this is very unintuitive. So if I were to tell you that we are using half the energy that's hitting Earth at a certain time, by what time are we using the entire energy that's coming from the sun and hitting Earth? It wouldn't be halfway in between now and then. It will be like we'll have a very small amount of time to respond to things. So so that number, 180,000 terawatt hours, that is about, and nowadays you've probably heard of SpaceX and Elon Musk talking about terawatt. Holy smokes. Very nice. You can close them, thank you. So this was before SpaceX's idea of planetary scale systems. But when I was looking at this, it was like, if we have a 30-year doubling rate in terms of energy use, in about 400 years, it's probably less than that, we would be using all the energy that's, it's not only on the half of the Earth, it's like if the sun could shine light all around the planet, in 400 years, we would be using all that energy as a society. So I'm thinking like maybe in 200 years, we will be using enough energy to, this says nothing about the amount of energy that life on the planet uses. This is like all light. If you are having 100% efficient solar panels, in 400 years, we'd be using all that energy. To me, this is a very strange problem because at this point, if you use all that energy, where the heck is that energy coming from? And if it's not coming from the sun, it would mean that we generate it here on Earth. And if we generate it here on Earth, it's almost like you have another sun creating that energy. So how am I going to dissipate that? It has nothing to do with greenhouse gases. It's more kind of like Boltzmann, like the radiated heat from the planet. And we would have to have a much higher increase in the planet's temperature. It's a very strange thing because my thought is like, what would I say? If I lived in the 1800s? So this is in 200 years from now. This might become the case. If I lived in the 1800s, what would I advise someone to tell the next 4 generations to structure their life so that they don't get to this problem? So I'm thinking like right now in the 2100 or 2000s, what would I tell someone in the next, let's say, 50 years, and that person could tell someone in the next 50 years, so that in 3 or 4 generations, by the time you reach 2200, you won't encounter this problem. And you literally have probably like 4 or 5 generations. So like, what would I tell my great-grandkids about this problem? And I don't think we know exactly. You've seen these, because I think they're very much in the news, the Kardashev scale civilizations, or maybe you haven't. So you guys seen that SpaceX is trying to launch terawatt, like satellites that are going to allow them to have terawatt scale compute in space, and they want us to become a type 2 civilization. So the Kardashev scale says if you use all the energy that's incident to the planet, you're a type 1 civilization. So you have control of systems that allow you to manipulate energy on a planetary scale. If you're a type 2 civilization, you have control of systems that allow you to manipulate kind of a star amount of power. And then type 3 is a galactic type of systems that allow you to manipulate energies on a galactic scale. My feel is that we are trying to play on the level 2, but we don't even know how to play on level 0. And I think we have to kind of literally, everybody's going to try, or people at the forefront are going to push in that direction. But I think we need to come up with like the user manual for how to run type 0 civilization and then type 1 before you get to type 2. When I think about type 2 civilization, this is kind of my thought about aliens. If you were to have some system that can control energies at the level of a star, if you make a very small mistake, let's say you have a 0.01 error in your calculations, and instead of dissipating the energy that you were thinking right here, you dissipate it right there. And right there, that's like if you look at how much energy, like what's the impact of the planet Earth energy system, it's like, I don't know, a minuscule amount compared to the energy that the sun outputs. So if I make a small change in my output, I can literally obliterate planetary level systems. So if you control systems at the star level, any small amount of minute errors or like variations in your outputs can obliterate entire civilization. So I'm like, if I were an alien civilization of type 2, I would probably be very, very, very careful where I am going to deploy these systems. And I probably want to, in order to maintain the diversity of this universe in a way, I want to probably deploy them far away from other solar systems, so I don't completely erase them. This is another interesting book from the 60s, Summa Technology, that talks about this. And this author is kind of talking about like, oh, you see a supernova, it might be that that's an alien civilization that has some sort of catastrophic event happening, and they lost control of their type 2 Kardashev scale system, and then the star exploded. That's very tenuous, but it's an interesting idea. Some more interesting books that I think what I don't like about them, they are very pessimistic in a way, and I don't think that helps in any way. But I think they do highlight some ideas. This one, David J. McKay, he's a physicist, and he also wrote kind of one of the most fundamental books in machine learning. So he's a very interesting character. He has a very eclectic type of interest in physics and machine learning and kind of energy systems. So going back, I was thinking like, okay, so we have 180 terawatts, so this number. And if you look at how is that split across different modalities of creating the energy, this is how it looks right now. The interesting thing is solar is kind of taking off. And in Canada and United States, I haven't seen it as much. In China, it's exploding. I come from Romania, from Eastern Europe. It's going crazy in Romania. Like, I have no idea why Canada is not acting on it, but everybody's building solar plants, and it's changing the infrastructure, like how people think about their energy. So this is kind of, so this was total energy. So you can see about 50,000 terawatt hours are oil. Coal is a big one. This is probably mostly because of China. Gas is another big one. But solar is kind of rising through the ranks here. And it's rising through the ranks mostly because China's pushing really hard. And they are literally shifting their entire economy to, it's not renewables as in like wind and hydro, it's renewables as in the sun. And I don't know if you've seen this, they have the largest solar power plant production in the world, so it generates about 18 gigawatts. And it's a solar power plant in the desert. And when I look at these numbers, what I'm thinking is like, what does that mean? So 18 gigawatts is installed power. So if the sun was right normal to the solar panels and shining on them in the most effective way, I think it would generate about 18 gigawatts. But the problem is you have day night, you have the sun is at different angles with respect to the panels at different seasons. So I think on average, it produces about 4 gigawatts. A nuclear power plant, I think, produces between 1 and 2 gigawatts. So this solar power plant here is equivalent, in my mind, to between 1 and 4 nuclear plants. This is one solar system, and you can see they have solar panels, but they also have these concentrators. So this is kind of like a different way to generate heat energy. The other interesting part is, so you look at these numbers. So this is how much solar energy is being generated in the world. I'll put a number in for your perspective. So United States uses about 3 terawatts of power across all modalities right now. United States uses 3 terawatts. 500 gigawatts of that is generated from its electric power, and the rest is coal and oil and gas. Another number, so you guys have it in mind, Spaceship, the huge rocket the Starship, the huge rocket that SpaceX has, from liftoff to getting into orbit, uses 100 gigawatts. So that rocket uses 1/5 of the electrical energy produced in the entire United States, or sorry, not produced, used in the entire United States. These are just numbers, so you guys have like a feel for what these values mean. China installed, just in the month of May in 2025, 93 gigawatts of solar power. So it was just a single month. So this is, again, I'm kind of ballparking it, so this would probably be maybe 20 gigawatts of average power. So it's about maybe 10 to 20 nuclear reactors in 1 month. They are playing a different game than us. And here, this is kind of that I literally went on Google Earth. I was like, where the heck is this thing? So I went to the desert. Okay, it's here, and then I was like, how big is it? And I put it on. This is the same scale, Vancouver. So you guys can see how it's a massive facility. But it's interesting because they have it at high elevation, so they have less atmosphere. It's fairly effective. It's in the desert, so it's always sunny. It's a very, very useful way to kind of use it. The other thing that's being done, and this is, I'm not sure how the future is going to develop. You guys have a lot of interesting skills, and to me, like this is a very interesting area to work in. So once you generate this power, this is being generated in the east here, sorry, in the west of China, and they have to move it to their industrial centers, kind of on the east coast here. And China is the only country who has engineering skills to build. I don't know if you guys have a feel for this. They build 1 megavolt DC transmission lines, power lines. I put one for kind of to see how the transformers look. This is kind of how a 1 megavolt transformer. So you'll have 1 megavolts between here and there. And this allows, because it's DC, it's not AC. So we here or in our province we use AC, and that AC it couples, and it's not very efficient at transmitting across large distances. These guys use DC, and they can transmit this power very efficiently across thousands of kilometers. And now they are exporting this particular technology. They're building similar things in Brazil. So they have become kind of the leaders in this field. I have no idea. To me, it's like I think we have a very interesting opportunity to try to develop this in Canada and also catch up with this. And a lot of this, it's not China. It's a lot of, for example, German companies, ABB, Siemens. They worked with the Chinese engineers. They developed this technology. I feel like, can we bring the same here? I have no idea how this works, but yeah, this is where I'm like, we have a lot of assets in Canada, and can we use some of them? So back to the idea of user manual. Very incipient thoughts here. I think the very important part is we have to educate everyone about the scales of the energies and powers that we use here. So education, I think, is going to be very important. I think if you look at there's all these plots of the GDP of an economy or the value in an economy versus energy, and there are no societies where you have low energy and high GDP. All societies they have a lot of value and they flourished. They use a lot of energy. So we have to use, if we want to maintain our standard of living, we have to use more energy, but we have to understand how it works. And this is to me like back to the idea of Kardashev 1 or Kardashev 2. We have to think carefully about how much energy and how much power does a certain environment can accommodate. If I dump too much power in a certain environment, I literally will burn it. If you dump like terawatts amount of power, you will burn, destroy everything there. And that is going to be, there's all these rates of change, derivatives of how fast can you dissipate things. And maybe you can use terawatts of power, but maybe not on Earth. So you'll be like, okay, we can use these systems, but we have to be outside the planet, because if you try to use it on the planet, you'll just destroy everything. And we have to understand what these are. And I have this idea, and I don't know how to capture it exactly. We learn through trial and error. We cannot simulate everything. We have to build it, and then we have to experience it. So I'm like, how can we create systems that allow us to try something and then undo it? And because if we try it and we fail, we don't want to be like, okay, I've tried this and now the entire planet is contaminated or something. I want to try this, and then I have the ability to undo it. And again, to me, and what I'm showing this is, can we try, if we want to develop, can we try this development not on Earth, but in space somewhere, so that if we make a mistake, we haven't affected the system that keeps us alive. Again, you probably saw the presentation yesterday with how expensive it is to get to space and what are the pros and cons of going there. But to me, if we try different technologies, can we try them out there so that we bring the valuable lessons here without the cost of that we have to pay to learn those lessons? Maybe, maybe not. The other thing I was going to say is, I think there's a lot of people that say if we don't control our exponential growth of energy, we will, even if we go to space, we fairly rapidly, maybe another now the 10 doubling rates, we will still reach the limits of the solar system. So then what do we do? My feel is that as we learn more about our environment, our perspective of what's important is going to change. So I feel like if you somehow become a Kardashev 1 scale civilization, where you understand what it means to control planetary scale energies, now all of a sudden what you kind of project value on is going to change, and you're no longer maybe going to chase this idea of continuous growth. You'll have a different perspective of our environment. This is from that book, Smart Technology, by Stanislaw Lem. And he talks about how in the Middle Ages, alchemists were very interested in creating gold from lead. And now that we have fusion and we have the gold blanket team there, we can actually create gold, not from lead, but from mercury. And we can create maybe we can create industrial scales. But this ability to create, transmute gold, lead into gold or some other element into gold pales in value with respect to what it means to have access to kind of atomic energy, like the ability to now control energies that are like in the nuclear reaction. Like, yeah, okay, I can create some gold, but I can also obliterate the entire planet. So it changes the perspective. So I think if you have different perspectives, you might be changing how you create your trajectory in the future. So right now, I feel like from the current point of view, we seem like, okay, we'll keep growing. But I think if you manage to grow a bit further, you'll realize that it's probably not as important to grow. Maybe you, I don't know, connect with aliens and you'll have different perspectives. Who knows? My feel is like we don't want to contaminate the planet. We want to contaminate we want to project that energy somewhere else in space. Why I'm saying space is because in space, the sun is literally putting out terawatts of energy. So if us adding a few more terawatts, it won't impact things. Like a solar flare will be the exact same thing. So can we use the energies in an environment where they are kind of normally being used? Something else that I want to kind of touch upon, kind of biology. This is another area that I feel like is going to explode. And there's a lot of resources that we have available that I don't think we understand exactly what they are. So I talked about how we can have, back in the 1800s, we're talking about labor and capital, 2000s, labor, capital, and energy. Maybe I shouldn't say labor here anymore. Actually, I think I want to say capital. And it's going to be capital, energy, and I think complex systems. So labor is a human. We'll see how much longer this is going to last. But I think the work we'll do is going to become less and less, and it will have like just automating systems like robots or factories, lights out factories that are going to build things for us. So I'm looking at a lot of people like saying like, oh, there's been a lot of outsourcing that went to China, and now the Chinese workers are making the income that the Western workers should make. I think if you go to China, you will see the Chinese workers are actually not making that much money because most of the factories are lights out factories. They have automated away everything. Cattle, one of the large, or I think they are the top battery manufacturer in the world. I think they produce about 30% of the batteries in the world. They opened a factory in Germany, and the Germans were like, oh yes, we have our own factory here. But that was a lights out factory. I think they had like on the order of 100 engineers working there. And everything is fully automated. So in my mind, a lot of the value that's being added is going to be, you'll have capital, you'll put energy, and then the other thing you'll have to have is some sort of information. So whoever has access to information will have more value. And this is why all the companies now that are doing AI are all about, can I mine your data? I will give you free anything, just give me your data, because they're extracting that information. I think you've seen this one, so I'll play it again just to remind you. But this is the idea we think on a manifold.
From 0 to 1, this box here turns
maybe
black.
I'll speed it up a bit.
When we are in two dimensions, we have two boxes to denote the position in this unit square. One box for the...
Oh shoot, come on. Sorry.
As we travel from 0 to
I'll
1,
leave it at
this
this.
box here turns black. When we are in two dimensions, we have
6
two
minutes.
boxes to denote the position in this unit square. One box for the x coordinate and one box for the y. In 3 dimensions, we have 3 boxes. Similarly, we can use 4 boxes to denote where we are in a 4-dimensional unit hypercube. The hypercube is hard to visualize, but we can get a feel of it through these boxes. This is the midpoint, this is a vertex, this is us moving on an edge. We can represent any point in, let's say, a 14-dimensional unit hypercube using 14 boxes. Here is some advice on how to visualize a 14-dimensional hypercube.
What you do is you visualize a 3-dimensional space and you say 14 to yourself very loudly.
Instead of 4 or 14, we now have 256 into 256 boxes. We can think of these boxes as pixels of a grayscale image. It's crazy to think that all kinds of images, screenshots, books, diaries, written in different kinds of scripts are all just points in this hypercube. It doesn't stop there though. If we sample points uniformly at random, we're always going to get noisy images. This tells us that images which make sense to us are extremely rare in the hypercube. Coming back to R2 space. If we move just a bit towards the origin, both these boxes become slightly whiter. Similarly, if we move linearly towards the origin, all the boxes or pixels become slightly whiter. This point is an image of a smiling girl and this point is an image of the same girl but with no smile. If we linearly travel between these 2 points, the transition is not smooth. That is, the intermediate points do not look like faces. But if we follow a path such that the intermediate points are also faces, the transition from no smile to smile would be smooth. Turns out, this path lies on the face manifold. Every point on or near this manifold is a face. For example, this point here is this face and this point is this face. If we travel between these points while remaining on the face manifold, we would have a smooth transition between the faces. These are some points in R2. We represent where they are using 2 coordinates, but the underlying structure of the data is 1-dimensional. The line near which the points lie can be called as a 1-dimensional manifold embedded in a 2-dimensional ambient space. We could represent each point using a local coordinate system on the manifold. In other words, this manifold lies in a 2-dimensional space, but is homeomorphic with a 1-dimensional Euclidean space. To elaborate further, in R2, if we are at this position, we have the freedom to go in any of these directions. But an imaginary ant which can only traverse on the manifold sees the world as R1 and has limited degrees of freedom. The only directions in which it can go are front and back. Similarly, all these spaces are just points in a high-dimensional space. But like the previous example, the dimensionality of the points is artificially high. The data lies on or near a low-dimensional manifold embedded in a high-dimensional space. These points have these many coordinates, but they can be represented using n coordinates with local coordinate system on the manifold. In this plot, we can observe that there is a correlation between height and weight in humans. We can say that all these points lie on or near a 1-dimensional manifold. This is an example of naturally occurring data having few underlying degrees of freedom. Physical bounds prevent us from observing a data point, let's say over here. It is not possible to observe a weight versus height distribution which looks like this. Similarly, there are correlations between pixels of images. Pixels in a region tend to have similar values. Physical laws restrict the degrees of freedom of the actual content of the images. Gravity restricts us from observing a cubic planet or a levitating man, so these images are definitely not on the naturally occurring images manifold. In this high-dimensional space, we actually have the freedom to go in any direction. But if we want to traverse only on the face manifold, our degrees of freedom are limited. Moving on the face manifold causes changes in the image. If we go off in a direction out of the manifold, we might find some freaky things which don't occur naturally, but mostly we will find just noise. These are some examples of us roaming around different manifolds. This is the clock images manifold. We have two images of a clock. One shows 4 o'clock and the other shows 4:40. If we take the midpoint of the linear path between these images, it would look like this. This image does not lie on the manifold, but the midpoint of a path which lies on the clock manifold would look like this, which makes more sense than this. By modeling the manifold, the computer can understand the image better. Machine learning algorithms like VAs and GANs learn to approximately model image manifolds using large-scale image collection. These models involve learning a mapping from a low-dimensional latent space to a high-dimensional pixel space. Moving in some direction in the latent space results in moving in some direction on the manifold in the high-dimensional pixel space. We don't explicitly define this mapping, it is learned as an optimization task. Getting more control over the features of the generated images is an area of ongoing research.
This is the idea of a manifold, and the way I think about it is we are a neural network too, and we are actually, our cognitive system is working on what I call the human cognitive manifold. So we can, imagine kind of all the thoughts I can think of are sitting on some surface of thoughts, and when I look at reality, I project that reality. When I sense reality, I project that reality on my human cognitive manifold, and I filter it. I take it from kind of its richness, and I'm biasing it through my manifold into my imagination. When I build things, I take things from my that have been simplified, have been in some sense digitized by my cognitive manifold, and project it back into reality. And with the amount of energy and power we use, we are modifying the reality around us to map onto what we think that reality should look like. So I have this example of a forest. This is a second growth forest that a human has planted, and this is how we think, okay, I think a forest should have trees in it, and it should have these type of trees. And we build them like that, but the real forest looks more, it has way more diversity, but we can't really, we are bounded rationally. We cannot envision all these details. So we have energy available to us, and we project what we think the reality should look like into the reality, and we create it in that image. And I think a lot of the more successful people nowadays have access to a lot of energy. They are modifying the reality around us so that it represents their imagined reality. How they are reifying that, they are bringing their imagination into reality. So I have this here about us kind of, and I'm very interested in how can we learn from these complex systems, these ecosystems. How can we learn the interactions that are happening, and this is going to hopefully give us some ideas of how can we create this user manual for how we control the planet. But I think a lot of times we are using these resources in a very simplified way. So instead of using them to understand how to balance multi-agents, we literally burn them more or less. So from my perspective, when I think about the reality, it has a very rich and vast kind of manifold in its diversity. And what we do through technology is we project that reality, that vast manifold, into somewhat of a different manifold, but it has much less diversity to it. So in the real world that we live in, the planet, we actually don't have very little. Okay, there's no nuclear fusion happening naturally. So we actually have developed new dimensions on the manifold, but we took a lot of the diversity in this manifold to be able to traverse up to the nuclear fusion kind of checkpoint. Same thing with like going to space or using lasers or communications or genetically modified beings. We took a lot of the information here and projected it through our imagination technology into different dimensions, but I think it wasn't very efficient. Something like, are there ways in which you can improve the efficiency here? And when I think about this is, when you do machine learning, you've learned about this whole gradient descent system where you have some sort of path that allows you to define a direction, and then you navigate up or down on that direction. Evolution is a system that allowed us to develop all this diversity, and evolution is somewhat random. But what it did is, over the course of 4 billion years, It used all the energy that hit Earth to create systems in a very diverse way. And now we can try to learn through that 4 billion years of exploration of our environment. Like the example I always give is if you are an alien that knows all the laws of physics, but you have never seen animals like are on Earth. If I tell you, okay, build me a tree, how long would it take you with your understanding of the laws of physics to come up with the organic chemistry and then all the proteins and all the interrelations between proteins to build a tree? It's a very, very expensive search in this manifold space. And I'm thinking like, can we extract some of that information? I think we have reached a point where we are actually learning that we can decode some of these systems. I have this example of, I don't know if you guys see these, an egg of a salamander growing from one cell to an entire adult. But to me, these are, we are speed running literally 4 billion years of evolution. Like let's say with a human, in 9 months, we are traversing 4 billion years by using kind of information systems to like catalyze, like accelerate, more or less kind of teleport ourselves from where life was 4 billion years ago to today. And this is, it's almost like a recipe that you can take and be like, okay, I can move to this parameter space very, very fast if I use these paths. I don't know if we recognize this as valuable as I think it should be. And it's, we are more or less, I think, blind to it right now. So hopefully, I guess through education, also kind of through new technologies, we'll start realizing that these systems are extremely complex and they have a lot of, it's almost like a lot of energy captured into their structures. And this energy is more or less kind of like the exploration of the parameter space through 4 billion years of dumping energy from the sun on the planet. I think Andrew Karpathy says something like, if you have a planet and you shine enough energy on it for 4 billion years, it's going to emit a Tesla at some point. So a Tesla car, because they launched a rocket in space with a Tesla car. So it's like, okay, it seems like the planet has evolved so that it emits a car at some point. In here, okay, I really like this video because they capture how from a single cell, that cell encodes, it encodes information that allows it to kind of traverse a huge amount of like branching possible solutions. And all these solutions in the tree of the steps it takes, they're all compatible with the previous solutions. And then you have at the end like an organism that kind of lives on its own. So when you develop things, you have to develop them in a way that is compatible with the things that came before it. And this is a very difficult, it's like if you look at legacy systems, you'll always be complaining about, oh yeah, I'm using Altium and there's all these features in Altium that I have no idea what they're on, but it's probably because, I don't know, 10 years ago somebody actually is using those features. So okay, this egg is gonna grow and it keeps growing and it's very cool, and then at some point you'll see it's gonna go into a tadpole. And you can at some point see when the heart starts beating, how the blood starts, here's the heart, I think the blood starts circulating. So very, very interesting to kind of see how from a single cell, now you're just injecting energy, and then the whole system is more or less within the egg, is self-contained, and it has all the resources plus the information to create this complex organism. And we haven't, as humans, we haven't reached the point where we can come close. So that Kardashev 2 scale or Kardashev 1, that's energy level, can we think about something like that in terms of complexity of information? That might give us some intuition about what are the rules that we have to follow to operate on Earth at those scales. So I have this. This is kind of my thought. We have very complex systems around us. We don't know how to use them. And a lot of times we use them in very primitive ways. My analogy here was like if you were to take there's a cell phone and it's turned off maybe or something, and you give it to somebody from 2,000 years ago, they'll look at it and be like, oh, it's a black brick. What can I do with it? Most likely, I will build a house. But the cell phone contains, like, if you use it appropriately, you literally have visibility into events that are happening on the other side of the planet. You can have visibility of events, the weather. It's going to happen like 5 days from now. You can talk to other people. So those are features that, unless you are aware of them, you will use these systems in very primitive ways, and you will more or less kind of destroy what we, in a way we are doing is we are taking apart a spaceship to build very simple systems that then I'm like, oh, wait a second. At some point you would have realized that actually the systems that we took apart were significantly orders of magnitude more interesting in the things that we are building. So maybe if you build things, we can build them so that we can maintain the complexity here. That this idea, so I talked about the Yanomamo tribes and the Vancouverites. So we have 100 billion products in our markets, but maybe the Yanomamo people, they have hundreds of billions products in their environment, their, I don't know, the forests there. They don't use them, all of them, but maybe through technology we can start using, so we'll have way more value by having access to these systems if we understand how they work. I just want to plant some thoughts in your mind. And what I'm seeing is biotech is advancing very rapidly, and we are starting to understand these systems, and we are starting to see how these systems impact us. And there is a very, again, there's lots of dangers here, and maybe so I feel like we will be able to change ourselves, like the biology in ours will be able to change it. And there's a lot of, well, nowadays it's just very incipient. You'll see, okay, I can change my gender or not. This is, to me, it's very preliminary. I'll be able to grow other limbs, or I'll be able to modify myself in very dramatic ways, much more than changing your gender. And it's going to be very interesting to see how can we cope with this. And it's also that there's some dangers here that we are going to create things that we cannot control. And similarly with I haven't actually mentioned with the energy. The energy right now is very difficult to control or to generate. It's very expensive to generate. But we will have access to energies that are, or maybe systems that can control energies at very, at much bigger scales. You probably heard about that the room superconducting material that was developed in Korea, and it wasn't actually working as a superconductor. That was, from my perspective, it was a big save, because if you can create room temperature superconductors, and the recipe is as simple as those guys are showing. Okay, I take something, put in a microwave oven or something in an oven, and bake it for a while, and then I have a superconductor. You have access to like insane amounts of energy in a very small space, and you can also dissipate that energy in a very short amount of time. So I'll have a superconductor, I dump in, I don't know, a few kilojoules of energy in it. I don't know, I put some tens of thousands of amps in it, and then I can dissipate that in milliseconds. I'll have like in, I don't know, 5 grams for like hundreds or thousands of kilograms of TNT. If you can build it that easily, it's extremely dangerous to use. Like you might want to have, you might have evil thoughts, or you might not. But if you have access to that type of system and you have no idea, you have a small mistake in your assessment of what you're doing, you can obliterate literally neighborhoods. So everybody's looking for the room temperature superconductor. I feel as if we find it and it's easy to make, it's a very, very dangerous system. It's the same with AI. Actually, if you have these systems that explode, that dissipation of energy in that short amount of time, it's a very easy to identify flag that is happening. With AI systems, we can still have energies that dissipate, but they will dissipate not in the same amount of time, like that's on the order of milliseconds or seconds. They'll dissipate on multiple orders of our like scale, human lifetime scales, and we won't be able to see it, to experience it appropriately. But it's still going to be an explosion, but it's going to be an explosion that happens over 500 years. And because as a human, you cannot experience it in your time scale, you'll say nothing is happening. But it's actually an explosion. And it's going to obliterate you, not you, but like 6 generations from now. So we have to, through technology, I think, we have to start having visibility into the system. We have to have dashboards that give us, okay, if we go this way, this is what's going to happen. And it's going to be very difficult to be able to grasp this, because a lot of times most of the people in our society won't be able to understand it. And if you don't understand it, you'll be like, oh, it's fake news. So you will have no ability to tell what you can trust from what you cannot. And a lot of times the trickiness is going to be that you'll be able to say, like, I should trust this 60% of the time. So there's a lot of nuance there in how you interpret things. So yeah, I think data is the new oil to me. It's a kind of the new way to, because the data is going to become the catalyst through which we can amplify the use of our energy. So the same thing, like, can I build that little lizard, the salamander, if I give you, let's say, I don't know, a petawatt hour of energy. Can you build me the laser from nothing? If I don't tell you the recipe, you don't have enough energy to explore all the parameter space. If I give you the recipe, the DNA sequence is literally a catalyst. It's a catalyst that creates these biological crystals in a way. So if life forms are fairly abundant in the universe, these might be, the life forms we have here might not be very valuable, but if they're not, these, I call them biological crystals, they are like, from my perspective, kind of invaluable. Like we cannot put a price on them. But unless we can use them, it's very difficult to evaluate them. This is one way we kind of use the land nowadays, and I'm like, okay, how is this effective for the long run? I think like we give a lot of land to cows. How much do I value cows? I mean, it tastes very good, but how much do I value cows in the long, like if I look at 1,000 years of human civilization, should I dedicate that much value to the information that's captured in the cow taste meat? So I don't know how to capture that exactly, but some ideas. So yeah, how can we incorporate the information? I think we are getting also to the point we haven't actually learned what I call it. I think I have it here, or do I? I think I'm missing it. Maybe I have it later. We haven't learned how to, I call it how to die. So when organisms die, we have a whole system that's in place that allows us to recycle the elements in those organisms and create more advanced systems. So in our industrial civilization, we haven't learned how to die, our technology dies. So we have a system that creates new systems, but then we don't know how to break it down so we can create the next generation of systems. We have to constantly extract new materials, and we cannot if we have the resources that are vastly more than what we are using, then we don't need to recycle things. But if we start reaching levels that are on a planetary scale, now all of a sudden we have to think about how efficient is my recycling? How do I learn how to die? And the death is not, I think we have a lot of emotion about it, like, okay, I've lost things. Death is more about how can we integrate, and you can look at the evolution of death. I think it was for like a few hundred millions years ago, where you had a biological system that now could use other biological systems' resources. So then you can have this kind of cycle that would allow you to accelerate the development, evolution. So this is kind of a picture that it's very interesting to me. We have plentiful abundance of fish. I think we had it until fairly recently. Now there's a lot of plastic being captured in the seas, and I think there's a lot of fishermen that are actually getting more debris in their fish nets than fish. It's a very strange condition we are finding ourselves in, and I have no idea how to kind of go about it. And this is, I put this here, I'm going to skip it a bit. So we have different levels of issues we have to deal with, and I think we have to be very fluent at transferring our attention from one to another. I think a lot of times we'll focus on the smaller things and we'll kind of ignore the bigger things. Climate change, I think, right now is on everybody's kind of mind, in the kind of the more liberal perspectives. My perspective is more about, okay, the biodiversity, climate, you might be able, climate, they're all kind of connected to each other, but I think this is, in the long run, this is going to become very impactful fairly rapidly. How the heck do we align ourselves with that? And the other thing, the way I think about this, let's say our biodiversity systems collapse. Then we'll have some technology that allows us to reintroduce them. So maybe through genetic engineering, I can create mammoths and dinosaurs and whatnot. I can bring the old animals, I can bring them back to life. You've probably seen these cycles. So nature has homeostasis. It maintains balance, but it maintains balance not by creating a steady state level. It's just by some things kind of die, and then the population kind of decrease. Then you have abundance in resources. Then populations increase, and they kind of die again, and increase and die again. Each one of these. So it might be that our civilization also goes through these cycles where we grow, we reach a peak, and then we kind of decrease in technology, and then we kind of dark ages, and then go back up, reach another peak, and we go back down. But to me, it's like, how much energy do you need to traverse one of these cycles? And that energy, then you can say, okay, if everything is coming from the sun and I can only dissipate this much, it's going to tell you how many cycles you can actually go through across, I don't know, a millennia or two. And again, like these are parts of the user manual of how you run a planet. Like, okay, each cycle of evolution takes this much energy. How many of these can I run? Very strange ideas, but I want to kind of different topics here. So going back to this, so I was showing you kind of, okay, you can have the value of our systems that we call it the intrinsic market value. The monetary value of the system is kind of in red. This is the social value system. So this is the as a society, you'll have, okay, I have all this infrastructure, but it maybe not, if everybody's depressed and they don't interact, they don't go outside anymore, it might be the social value has decreased. And then we have what I think is the ecosystem value. And I think what we are doing is we are extracting a lot of value from the ecosystem to build these other types of value, but we have to somehow, like literally, we don't even have a way to measure this. So it's not even appearing on our dashboard. So I'm like, okay, how the heck do we maintain it? Okay, the last one, so this is kind of all these things, I'm like, things are gonna move very fast. How do I maintain my humanity in a way? And I look at the biological systems, and I come, in my mind, I come up with this metaphor of the biological systems have a cell. Everything is kind of built on cells, and cells allow you to delineate something that's you from the environment, and everything that you can control from things that you cannot control. My mind is, how do I build a good human cell that I can live in and kind of be able to maintain humanity while I'm traversing a very strange techno-social development. So these are more kind of well, I'm not sure how to describe them, so I'll just go through them. I think a lot of times we are going to be, in order to develop a good human cell, you have to come up with an understanding of the cell wall is going to be destroyed by our, and this is a very like biases. So how do we, what are artifacts in our cognition that are going to prevent us from maintaining a good cell wall? And one of them that's very important to me that I think is, that the problem is it's detrimental in how we exchange information, is this idea of the bias of halo and horns. So halo is like when you see somebody being good in a particular field, how well are they in other fields? You say, okay, they're good at pianist, they must also be a good soccer player or something. And this is our brain trying to simplify the world so that you can act very rapidly in it. The flip side is you have the horns effect. If they're bad at something, if they're a bad politician, they must be also a bad mathematician or something. And you start ignoring the ones that are good, you kind of try to project them in all fields, and the ones that are bad, you're ignoring all their inputs. From my perspective, I've seen most of the scientists that have made important contributions to our understanding of society are very eccentric characters. And they would be considered kind of very, I think a lot of them are going to be considered kind of perceived negatively, and then their impact, if it was to be assessed in today's society, they would be ignored. But I think we have to somehow control these innate biases and kind of transcend them. I put this course, this is a Coursera course, that discusses how you can, and we have to maintain this communication even when there's very opposing kind of perspectives on what you consider valuable. I think we need to continue the exchange of information. Otherwise, creating these extremes is going to result in a more or less kind of, there's going to be some critical factor that's going to collapse society in some way. So this course, Speak Freely, Think Critically, they cover a lot of concepts from neuroscience on how our brain, in order to manage interactions with others, we literally do not hear what others are saying. And this has evolved for more or less kind of tribal interactions where you have them and us, and you kind of fight amongst these different tribes. But on a planetary scale, I don't think this is feasible. And yeah, this is the parable of the elephant. So we had I think 7 wise men that are all blind, and they were looking at the elephant, and each one of them thought that the elephant has a particular shape. So I don't know, this guy was looking at the leg of the elephant, it's like a tree. This guy was looking at the body of them, it's like a wall. And we all look at the same reality, but we perceive it differently through our biases. And then each one of us says, no, the reality is like this, even though reality is probably like a combination of all our perceptions. I also feel like nowadays, a lot of the times we are fighting the previous generation's battles. I don't know how to describe this. We have new battles, but the previous generations, through inertia, is pushing their battles onto the new generation, and even though the new generation should kind of deal with the newer type of problems. I don't, again, kind of the idea is how can we take this and kind of change people's perspectives through communication? And my thought here is, I can't remember, I don't know who Thomas Saz is, but he made this interesting statement that every act of conscious learning requires the willingness to suffer an injury to one's own self-esteem. This is why young children, before they are aware of their own self-importance, learn so easily, and why older persons, especially vain or important, cannot learn at all. So we have to erase some of ourselves to allow ourselves to learn. And I don't know how to train somebody to do that, but I think as you become older, you will lose your ability to learn as a child, and you'll become much more jaded. And I think it's very important to not lose that, to be able to adapt to new environments. And to adapt to new environments, you'll have to be humble. And this is where I'm a bit kind of, I don't want to give these talks, because I'm not humble enough by giving these talks. But my thought is, you want to move, so let's say as a child, you move your understanding from one place to another, and this is kind of the tower of beliefs you have. As a child, the surface that you move on, you can very easily glide, so there's not a lot of friction there. But as you grow older, when you try to move from one understanding to another, you kind of, you get tripped by your self-importance in a way, and also kind of the set of values you have defined, and you cannot move to a new understanding, because that new understanding requires you to kind of lose track of your previous understanding. And I think you can, as a scientist, maybe you have the tools, or as an engineer or a technical person, you have the tools to be able to traverse this and say, yes, this makes sense. Okay, the planet is getting warmer or something. But as a non-technical person, you have to more or less kind of, it's almost like a religious act. You have to believe what others are saying and take them at their word, because you don't have you might, if you put effort into understanding all the coherent kind of pattern of daisy chain of thoughts that kind of moves you from one location to another. But it's a very difficult kind of transition to make. Again, I'm kind of going back to everybody should be educated very well. And I think Thomas Jefferson mentioned this, how it's like more important than having a rule-based society is having an educated society. Because if you have very good rules, but the society is not well educated, people are not going to adhere to the rules because they have no idea, why do I have to follow that rule? So I'm going to be around probably another 40, 50 years. You guys will probably get around for another 50 to 80 years. You'll encounter these problems much more poignantly than I am. I'm just kind of bringing them up. So when I look at these, so moving from one perspective to another, I'm realizing that this is the thing I've observed, the Western perspective, and it's not the Western, it's kind of the capital, not even capital, I don't know how to describe it. There's a global perspective, and this global perspective has been erasing a lot of local idiosyncrasies, a lot of local patterns in how people think. And I was trying to kind of learn more about previous societies and how they kind of can cope with different rules and still feel like the society is equitable. And there's this book, Legal Systems Very Different from Ours, that discusses different types of societies here. And you'll see in these different types of societies, we think that we live in an equitable society, but these guys also thought they live in an equitable society. And they have very different rules. But those rules, they are selected in such a way that they still balance each other out. So you can still live there. And maybe from my perspective, if you see these different set of rules, you'll be like, oh, you know what? I can maybe modify my society's values and kind of conduct so that I can adapt more easily, because these guys were able to do it in this different way. If you have a single perspective, it's very difficult to tell what the depth of the system is. If you have multiple perspectives, you can see much more deeply. This is a thing where I feel like we need to constantly evolve. And the example I gave is a very simple game. So this is the prisoner's dilemma. I think you all know it. If there's two people who committed a crime, if both of them, the police caught them, and they don't say anything to the police, they both get 1 year of prison. If they betray each other, they both get 2 years of prison. But if one of them says the other guy did it, and the other guy says no, none of us did it, the guy who is going to blame the other person gets to go free, and the blamed person gets 3 years of prison. And if you look at the game theoretical aspects, the winning strategy is you have to blame the other person, and the equilibrium that you arrive at is this kind of unoptimal equilibrium when both of you get 2 years of prison. But if you look at this game, so you can play this game in very different instances. In the 1980s, I think there was this competition where they were playing this game, and you had like kind of the smartest mathematicians and kind of game theorists come up with these agents that would play the prisoner's dilemma. They came up with like, okay, they played them against each other and who came on top. And if you look at the game itself, or I think you probably know that tit for tat, so I'll do whatever you do, is somewhat of a winning strategy. The problem is if you look into this system in a social structure where you have many agents playing against each other, the game develops, and here what we are seeing is as time progresses and you'll have many gameplays, you'll have different types of populations kind of becoming the winning population. So it might be that, in the beginning, the winning population is the population that blames everybody. And that population, if everybody blames and now you play kind of tit for tat, you'll have an advantage, and you'll become the population that's kind of the most prolific population. But when tit for tat becomes the most prolific, other populations become, they can how do I call it, feed on the biases of tit for tat. In this, there's no stable equilibrium. This is a chaotic system. It constantly changes. So when you think about, in evolutionary theory, you hear about this idea of the survival of the fittest. The survival of the fittest doesn't mean the survival of the strongest. It means the survival of the person who's the best fitted to the current environment. So I don't know, 1,000 years ago, the strongest physically person was the fittest. Nowadays, the smartest, numerically wise person is probably the fittest. You will have many resources. It might be with AI in the next 100 years, the numerically smart person is not going to be the fittest anymore. It's going to be somebody else who maybe has, I have no idea what other traits you could have. Maybe emotional, can connect with people much better or not, or you can manipulate people. So you'll have different traits that are going to become the fittest depending on the population you live in and also kind of the technologies that you have around you. So there's, this is kind of from a machine learning perspective, the concept is you cannot have one system that is optimal across all gameplays. If you have a system that's you're trying to optimize across all gameplays, it's going to play random, more or less. So there's this theory of the no free lunch theorem, where you have, if you try to train an AI that's good across all possible gameplays, it's going to do more or less average or random behavior. It's going to be 50% of the time able to cope. A lot of times I think there's this analysis paralysis problem where you think about, okay, how far in the future should I think about when I take an action, and what should my actions be? And it's instead of taking actions, you just say, I'm not going to do anything. And now I want to get to, I see it, this is where I'm talking about the death. So we have to learn how to take actions in such a way that they allow us in the future to kind of still grow. And I'm gonna go back to this idea of the death. And to me, the death is gonna be how do I not only how do I use my resources so that I recycle them in a way, but also how do I take the assets I have and pass them on to the next generation in a way that they can use it. So in a way that it's useful to you. And nowadays, I think you'll probably notice this. There's going to be a lot of items that are going to be accumulated by your parents, or maybe your grandparents or not. And when your parents pass on, and I think my parents pass on, I see how much stuff they have. And a lot of that stuff to me is like useless, because the technology has moved along, and I no longer need the super expensive china, all the plates and things that my grandma gave me. I'm like, okay, those were valuable for you, but they're no longer valuable for me. So how do I how can I create something that is valuable across many multiple generations, or can be reused across multiple generations? And here this is going to be a bit controversial. But I feel like a lot of times we focus on kind of accumulation of capital or assets or not, and then consumption. And very few of us focus on kind of how do you allocate these assets. And a lot of times I find that learning how to allocate assets that you already have is a very, very difficult activity. And I'm looking at philanthropic organizations here, and I think it was Bill Gates. He was saying like, look, if I were to run my company, Microsoft, it's very easy because I know I have this revenue, I make this profit, I know which way the profits increase. But if I try to allocate my wealth to philanthropic organizations, it's very difficult for me to come up with a figure of merit that tells me that I'm doing a good job of allocating these resources. And I think what's happening nowadays is most of the asset allocation that's being done is being done by government organizations, not by corporations. And the government organizations, I don't know how much thought has gone into how we allocate these resources. So I have these numbers here, and these are a bit obsolete now. But I was looking at, okay, so the richest people, and I think these numbers are now inverted, and they're actually a few orders of magnitude larger, maybe one order of magnitude, maybe a bit less. But these guys were making, so I was looking at Jeff Bezos, their total wealth 2020, I think it was $183 billion. Elon was 150, I think he's about 700 or 800 right now. But I look at the total wealth accumulated over their lifetime, and then I'm looking at the year's budget for different classes of spending. And this is 93, so these guys are in billion. This is over 40 years. So I think it's $93 trillion. And this $93 trillion, who is in charge of allocating this? And to me, is not, you won't have a human. You'll probably have like some automated system that I think will do a very poor job at allocating these assets efficiently. And I think you can blame the rich people that, hey, you're not allocating these assets. Or what we can do is try to come up with systems that allocate these assets as efficiently as possible. These are many orders of magnitude more money than what these guys made in their entire lifetime. So, and I think everybody's looking at these guys instead of looking at how can we improve the underlying systems that we're allocating resources to everybody else. And to me, it's like a cognitive bias, where it's like, yes, I know, I'm always looking at the Jones. Why do those guys have more than me? Instead of me looking at, okay, the system that everybody's working on is inefficient in this way. How can I improve that? Things are accelerating, so I have no idea how. And it's very difficult. It's a very hard problem. Here's some of my thoughts. So how can we recycle some of this wealth? And originally I was looking at different cultures. So here on the northwest coast, you probably know about the potlatch events where the wealthiest would give their wealth to everybody else in their community. And this redistribution of wealth would allow kind of the people who have nothing to kind of now have some wealth, and they would be able to generate more wealth with that, and then somebody will become all again very wealthy, and that wealth will get redistributed. I think if you look at probably 1800 or probably 1500s, 1600s, every time a new king would come into power, all debts would be erased, and then you would have a debt jubilee, and then everybody would kind of start from scratch. I think nowadays everybody's talking about the universal basic income. Okay, AI is going to come, and everybody's going to have, I don't know, some amount of money, $1,000, $2,000 a month, kind of as universal basic income. And to me, that might work. It's almost like everybody's retired right off the bat. So you don't have to work. You're starting retired, and then maybe if you have some interest, it could work. My thought here is, and this is kind of me running some numbers, can you have someone become financially independent by the time they get to be 18 or 20? So if I were to have kids, let's say, and I invested on their behalf, as soon as they're born, I invested $200,000 in a bank account that's associated with them. And I let that money kind of grow from the time they're born to the age of 20. By the time they're 20, that money would have become $1 million. So by the time you're 20, you would have enough money. And with $1 million, it's not like you're rich, but you are financially independent. Now you can chart your own course. If you're interested in staying in school, you can stay in school. If you're interested in working something that so you're no longer constrained by financial resources, more or less. If you want to have, I don't know, I want to travel the world every day, you'll have to make more money. But So it might be that I have no idea if this is working, but can the government provide $200,000 for every newborn? In Canada, it's a very strange implementation. So I don't know if you probably guys are aware. Actually, the population of Canada, if you have no immigration, would decrease fairly rapidly. And if you look at the government's approach is like, we are not going to provide kind of resources to grow the population from inside. We are going to try to bring more immigrants. This might work for another 10 or 20 years, but I don't think it's sustainable. So I think the government at some point will have to focus much more on how do we maintain our population levels, or maybe control them in some way, maybe don't fall as fast. Because I think if you're not careful, in 2 or 3 generations, you can have like only 1 million people or something, so a very small amount of people. But how can we manage our population so that people feel incentivized to have kids? And to me, that adds a lot of meaning and value to people's life, and also provide kind of ways in which people feel that they control their life instead of kind of becoming coupled to this monetary system, and they are kind of like running on this treadmill of constantly like, okay, I need to make money to live. And this would allow us maybe to more easily understand how to work at planetary scale. I don't have specific answers. My feeling is that, and you've probably seen this, the system that we are building is sucking up all the value of our environment, both kind of in terms of diversity of the environment and spatially across the world, to a few very nexus kind of points. And not only is it sucking kind of spatially and kind of in diversity of environments, also kind of sucking up temporally. We take value from the future and bring it to the present, so we kind of experience it. And from my perspective, instead of having everything kind of connected here, can we think about it as in a much broader scale? Can we allow this value to be expanded kind of across time and space? So a few more points that I think are very important. I feel like a lot of the communication issues we have are because we are allowing this mental systems to kind of override our more kind of rational thoughts, and we have to, in a way, fight it, or maybe just change our perspectives. So there's this scale I have of emotions in a way. You can ignore someone, you can hate someone, you can have the tolerance, you have maybe somewhere in there empathy and compassion. And empathy is like you feel what others are feeling. Compassion is, but the problem with empathy is very dangerous in the sense that you feel what they're feeling, and if they feel pain, you also feel pain. You've probably heard of these, the mirror neurons, where literally when I see somebody in pain, I have my pain neurons also firing, and it's you are feeling the pain. But when you feel pain, all of a sudden your attention becomes much narrower, and it's focusing on what is causing the pain in the immediate kind of context. But it might be that the pain that you're feeling is due to some other system that's not in the immediate context of the pain being generated. And compassion is transcending this pain and allowing your attention to expand again. And if you want to help someone, instead of empathizing with them and now having your attention also being narrowly focused, if you are compassionate, you can understand that the source of their pain is somewhere else and address their pain in this kind of much more efficient way. I think there's a lot of mental exercise that I think we need to develop that we haven't, and it's you go out in the world and all of a sudden you're like, I feel a lot of times like overwhelmed. There's like, holy smokes, there's all these issues happening. How the heck do I act in this way if I feel it's a lot of weight, and you have to kind of transcend that. I think the Buddhists had a fairly interesting approach here with compassion. So yeah, we are not rational. We are sometimes predictably rational. I have these ideas of, okay, we have to come up with a value function that allows us to, this is from reinforcement, that allows us to kind of evolve across multiple generations, and I don't know what that would be. I don't even know if that function exists. Is the biggest problem. And I think a lot of times as engineers, you'll feel like you're going to be, you'll have this analysis paralysis. You have no idea how to act. And I have there's this paper that was published this year in January. The moral blueprint is not necessary for the STEM wisdom, that I also kind of recommend if you have time to read. So this paper is saying that a lot of times and if you look at the ethics code of the professional engineers in BC, you have that ethics code is built on certain moralities. And morality is a concept that I think was probably effective at creating viable societies probably until maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. I think nowadays morality is actually detrimental. And it's detrimental because we don't have a way, and this paper describes it much better, we don't have a way in which we can balance out different moralities. So we think something is good and we think something is bad at the same time. So I give this example with, like say, facial recognition. You can look at it from different perspectives. You can use facial recognition to help visually impaired users, or you can use facial recognition for assisting authoritarian surveillance. So our morality says, okay, if I'm trying to help visually impaired users, that's good. If I try to help authoritarian regimes, that's bad. So then you have these two conflicting moralities. What should I do? And a lot of times it's just you become paralyzed. I won't do anything. And the paper talks about how wisdom is kind of transcending that, and they talk about this perspectival metacognition. And I think this term is derived from a cognitive scientist from the University of Toronto, John Vervaeke. I don't think the author is mentioned, but from my reading, I've heard it first with him. And perspectival metacognition refers to you being able to transcend, kind of, you look at, why is my morality like this? What are the way the metacognition is, you perceive the world through a certain set of biases. Can you actually look at you can look at the world through these biases, or you can focus on your attention on the biases themselves. And the author, John Vervaeke, talks about, you look at the world through glasses. Can you look at the glasses and see, okay, these are the properties of the glasses, you put them back on and like, okay, this is why I see this world like this. Then I change to some other glasses. I see the world in a different way. So the paper at the end, they talk about a few different potential techniques to develop what I call wisdom, and they have a fairly important kind of definition of wisdom. But the ways that they kind of potential techniques are, so I think from their perspective, they observe that a lot of times if you think about from a first person perspective, a lot of times you'll be stuck. But if you narrate the same problem from a third person perspective, and it'll be like, okay, Meaty has a problem with his age bridge. The age bridge doesn't work because of blah, blah. If I narrate from a third person perspective, I detach myself from my emotions, and I can act in a much more I can manifest my agency much more freely. And they have different kind of, they back up this with different experiments there. You changing perspectives, so taking both the pro and contra position to the topics that you're discussing, allows you to see nuances in kind of the arguments, and try to understand where there are certain weaknesses in certain arguments and where there are certain strengths. A lot of times I think, and this works a lot, explaining complex topics to somebody who doesn't understand them gives you, the explainer, and I think you guys are aware of this, a much better insight into the systems. And you'll have a much better understanding of what are the implications of using these systems. Then the last one they provide there is this contextual rotation. So you look at the same problem from the lens of different users. And then through that, you're trying to understand, okay, what are some of the constraints I need to put in place to get the system to work, but not kind of go into this very detrimental direction. They call all this developing a perspectival metacognition. So this allows, from my perspective, is a way in which you as an engineer can transcend this analysis paralysis. And I see a lot of people who are like, look, I'm not going to work on these topics because I think they are detrimental to society. I'm like, well, they're detrimental in this way, but they're very beneficial in this other way. Like if you look at like what we discussed with the satellites last evening, well, you can have satellites for war, or you can have satellites to predict weather and kind of allow you to communicate across the globe. You just have to be able to change context, understand how to prevent bad things from happening. I have some quotes here. So the world is very different now from a man holding in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. This is John F. Kennedy. We had kind of nuclear bombs in place. I think now we have many more different ways in which we can abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life, not only nuclear bombs. But yeah, so we have to be even more, we act even more differently. But I feel like there's not enough discussion about this. And then the last one is, Ursula K. Le Guin. I always go back to this. So this is from a trilogy, or are there 4 books? Maybe there are 4 books. Wizard of Sea, and she talks about this this young magician who cast a spell that caused some evil from kind of being unleashed in the world. And there's a wise old mage that comes to him and tells this guy, "You thought as a boy that the mage is one who can do anything. So I thought once, so did we all. And the truth is that a man's real power grows and his knowledge widens ever the way he can follow grows narrower, until at last he chooses nothing but does only and wholly what he must do." And to me, like this, I mapped this directly to the amount of energy you use. So if I have petawatts of power available, if I have petawatts of power available, I cannot just project it randomly in the world. Hey, I want this and I want that and I want that, because I will very much obliterate everything around me. And I will have a very narrow path on which I can use this power in literally watts to maintain kind of the environment around me. It might be that the power on Earth, that these paths that you can choose, if you try to use the power on Earth, are very narrow. But if you go to another environment, the paths all of a sudden branch out and you have way more freedom to use the power. So depending on the system in which you are operating, you have more or less freedoms to use this power. So this is more or less it. I think for a lot of you who are graduating soon, you are, and this is kind of, I like this idea, you are at a critical point where the derivative in your life is close to zero. You have no directions actually in which you are pushed. You have this momentary point where like, okay, what do I choose to do with my life? I think you'll choose a path and you'll go down that particular state space trajectory. But I don't know how you can just remember. You can come back. So if you manage to make yourself a bit more independent, if you can create this cell around you that allows you to, in a way, isolate yourself, and you have some freedom, but think carefully about what that freedom is. You can then start kind of feeding back some of your energy back in the system, and maybe you can enhance the system that we have, and maybe you can improve it. You can fix things. I don't know much, but exactly how to do it, but I'm hoping that you'll be able to see this, that once you reach a certain financial point, the wealth you have is not about the money, it's about the value you have around you, and that value is going to be changing constantly. You'll have to kind of be able to somehow understand it and kind of engage with it. The last one I have here is there's a lot of people who are trying to predict the future. But I think the people who are going to be able to, the people who are best at predicting the future are the people who are building the future. So hopefully you guys are going to become some of those builders. I think a lot of times there's this guy, John Boyd, was colonel in the US Air Force. And he was saying, do you want to do something, or do you want to be someone? So you can be someone, and like a lot of times you can become rich and kind of live in your nest there doing very little, or you'll still be somewhat rich, but maybe you're much more focused on doing things and kind of doing things maybe not only personally but kind of engaging with the society at large. Then I have Wynne Shotwell, who I think is a very, very astute technologist, and SpaceX, as far as I can tell, would never have been able to develop to the point where it is without her kind of special sauce in the mix. She has this quote, "I always smile when people make projections on what can and cannot be done with technology." But I think much more important, I think she has what I call a very good way to match impedance with others. And matching impedance, hopefully you guys have a feel for, if you don't match impedance, a lot of the energy you put in a system gets reflected back into you. If you match impedance, you are able to channel all this energy in a very effective ways to others. And her ability to kind of connect at a human level with people was in the ecosystem of engineers. SpaceX was very unique. So she was this kind of velvet glove, iron fist kind of. She was able to maintain very good impedance matching with people at large, with other organizations, with kind of other resources, people who provide resources, while also kind of connecting very effectively with all the development that SpaceX was putting in place. I hope that at some point she's going to write a book, because I think there's a lot of very interesting heuristics that maybe she has developed in kind of being able to channel very fast-moving organizations in ways that allow it to kind of move through society very effectively. It's like a very low friction, and you're matching impedance to your environment very well. So in my mind, okay, you match very well impedance with the traffic when you don't speed through traffic, or you're not too slow through traffic. When you're kind of like just gliding along with the traffic, that's you're matching impedance to the system. All right, so that's about it. The appendices here, I think they might be interesting. There's actually one that I want to mention. These are, so I'm a big reader of books, but I managed to get Carl Hansen, I don't know if you guys know who he is, the CEO of Opcelera, to recommend some books. And all the books he recommended here, these are very heavy duty books. I really like them. I recommend them if you have time to kind of read some of them. They give you a very diverse set of perspectives on society, and I think Carl is not only an amazing technologist, kind of researcher, but very insightful philosopher. Maybe we'll have him at some point here to discuss things. I also put some other books here. I like to read biographies. There are some very interesting people here who kind of went through extraordinary paths in their lifetime. So I think from my perspective, everybody in the Western world is much closer related probably to the Winston Churchill lifestyle than either Nelson Mandela's or Deng Xiaoping's paths. But I think these two guys, they were able to transcend from kind of very, very simple lives to the pinnacle of kind of running a civilization, and they traversed that entire spectrum. They were able to do it very efficiently, and you'll see how they kind of, at certain times, they're ignoring the inequities that were being put on them so that they maintained their trajectory. And then some other books. These books are more related to kind of how you manage your money. All right, that was more or less it. At the end here, I just have come up with a good way to understand your relationship with money. These were kind of the topics. Maybe some of them helped, maybe some of them didn't. I feel like maybe most of them won't really help until you're probably like 5 to 10 years into your profession, or like in your growth as a human. Maybe by that time, though, I have no idea. Again, like these might be so obsolete by 10 years from like in 2036 that they're not useful. But maybe there are some nuggets there that you can maybe develop into some other forms of thought. You guys, my thought is like, when I retire, you'll be the people who are going to create value. It won't matter like the money I have, because the value that money represents, if we stay at the current level, might be nothing. If we keep moving, that value is going to be growing like many times. Or it's not even the value, it's more kind of like, can I understand more about life around us? Anyway, that's more or less it. It was a very, very, very long lecture here. Sorry for holding you guys for 3 hours. Yeah, anyway, I talked for a lot. I have no idea if you guys have any questions, but